and giving us an early read on what they're thinking as the nation is heading into an unprecedented presidential election year that could test American democracy as it's never been tested before. This is CNN's coverage of America's Choice 2023. I'm Erin Burnett.
And I'm Jake Tapper. We are about to get the first results of the night, possible clues about the political trends in 2024 and the potentially historic and divisive rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Polling places just closed in the eastern half of Kentucky. The Commonwealth has one of two governor's races tonight. New measure of the Democrats' strengths and weaknesses on Republican turf. Popular Democratic Governor Andy Beshear is fighting to keep his job in Kentucky, where President Biden is very unpopular. Beshear is facing a strong challenge from Republican Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who is aiming to be Kentucky's first black governor. And in Mississippi, Democrat Brandon Presley, that's right, a second cousin of Elvis, he's facing off against Republican Governor Tate Reeves. Presley is running an unusually competitive race in a state that has had GOP governors for 20 years. Now, Virginia has one of the most consequential battles tonight. Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin is hoping his party will win full control of the Virginia legislature for the first time in a decade, and that would open the door to passing his conservative education agenda and new abortion restrictions in the Commonwealth, which trends blue in presidential elections. In red-leaning Ohio, we're watching a very significant test of that abortion issue and its potential impact in 2024. Ohioans are deciding whether to guarantee access to an abortion in the state's constitution, and that vote could continue or end an unbroken series of ballot victories for abortion rights supporters ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. Also tonight, we're going to release an exclusive new CNN poll on the 2024 presidential race with just 2 months to go before the lead-off Republican contest in Iowa. There is so much more ahead as more polling places close and as we stand by for the first results from parts of Kentucky where voting just ended. But right now, let's go to Eva McKend at Governor Beshear's headquarters in Louisville, Kentucky. Eva, what's the thinking inside the Beshear camp right now?
Well, Jake, we know that the governor is currently in Frankfurt at the governor's mansion, watching at least some of the returns with his family. What I can say is that Democrats feel cautiously optimistic going into tonight. They feel confident in the strategy that the governor has employed, and that really has been straying away from partisanship. He has overseen natural disasters in this state's tragedies, the pandemic, and all the while he's really branded himself as part of Team Kentucky and says that Kentuckians many policy issues they can agree on. But Republicans here have always said that the math is always going to be challenging for Beshear in this ruby red state. We know that Jefferson County will be an important county to watch in 2019. Beshear did very well there, capturing it by over 100,000 votes. He'll need to do well again tonight if he's going to pull off this victory in this red state. Jake? All
right, Eva McKend in Louisville, Kentucky. Let's go to Kyung La in Columbus, Ohio. She's tracking the state's abortion rights ballot measure. Kyung, has there been last-minute campaigning on this issue?
It's still happening as we are speaking, Jake. There's 90 minutes left on the clock and both sides of this issue. It is known here as Issue 1 say that they are continuing to make the calls, to hit those undecideds, to still try to persuade to the very, very last minute and to get people to the polls because the polls don't close until 7:30. I'm hearing that from both sides. They believe that it is going to be the defining issue of 23 leading into 24. What they are expecting here, I am at a pro Issue 1 event, and what they expect is that as those first returns start to come in tonight, it will be favorable for them, favorable for the abortion choice rights group on enshrining those abortion rights into the state constitution. But what they're really cautioning people about is that it's those early votes that come in first that are counted, and those tend to lean to the Democrats. And so as the night goes on, those numbers are going to start to shift as other parts of the state come in. And the question will be, quote, where do we land? That is what we are hearing from one of the activists here at this event. They are encouraged by the turnout, though, Jake. The question is Where is that turnout? Who are those voters? And will it be for the groups that are supporting issue 1 and a real test of this democratic theory on abortion?
All right, Kyung La in Columbus, Ohio. We'll come back to you a lot of times throughout the night. Thanks so much. And I am at the Magic Wall right now with who else but John King. John, we're expecting a lot of very tight races tonight. What are you going to keep your eye out for?
Let's start by looking at our very first votes. We have our very first votes in the Kentucky governor's race. And as Kyung just noted, it's early in the night. What matters is later tonight. But we'll count them all as they come in. The incumbent Democrat, Andy Beshear, with a very narrow 12-vote early lead in just this one county out here. But what are we looking for tonight? Whether it's the abortion initiative in Ohio, whether it's the legislative races in Virginia, whether it's this race right here in Kentucky, the suburbs, and can abortion right forces continue their momentum? If they do, then Democrats perform well in the suburbs, or that ballot initiative will perform well in the suburbs, and they come out on top. If not, Virginia, you mentioned, Governor Youngkin trying to sell a compromise, 15 weeks with exceptions for rape, incest, life of mother. He thinks that's a way to not maybe win the suburbs, but to compete more strongly in the suburbs. Donald Trump, the Republican Party, collapsed in the suburbs under Trump. Youngkin thinks he has a way back. So we're going to start here. These are the first votes. As you noted, this is a Democratic incumbent running in a very red state. Here's the test. Is the Beshear brand stronger than the Biden drag? Because Biden is so unpopular in this state. So let's look at this map. Look at when Donald Trump ran for president in Kentucky. This was not close. This is a red, red, red state, right? Look at the margin here. But look up here, and look over here, and look out here, right? Just watch that. Lexington County, this is Jefferson County where Louisville is, Fayette County where Lexington is. 25% of the population lives there. That's where your African-American Democratic base is. Beshear has to run it up there. But when he won in 2019, Jake, look at that. See the blue? Mm-hmm. See all that blue in places Trump won? Andy Beshear, as Eva was noting, runs as a guy from Kentucky, as a centrist Democrat, as one of you, as your governor. His dad was governor. The family has a brand there that has been able to survive big Republican tides. Can he do it tonight when the President of the United States is so unpopular? If he does, see those suburbs? That's Cincinnati, the northern Ohio suburbs. Out here, the further out. But he also competes in rural areas. This is one of the few Democrats, the Kansas governor would be another one, who compete in the rural areas right here as you watch him come out. So now let's come back and let's come live. Let me clear this out. We have some early votes in Mississippi as well. But let's pull this back out and take a look. That's 2019. Let's come up here. Make sure we're looking at the right map. See, we're starting to fill them in. Daniel Cameron now has the lead. It was 112 for Andy Beshear. Now it's 773 for the Attorney General, Mr. Cameron. But again, very early on, population centers are where you see the big cities. But this is why election nights are great. We start to get the votes, we count them. And this part of the state, the polls are still open. It's divided by the Eastern and Central time zone. So we got a long way to go, but we're starting to get votes.
And Beshear is, for those who are not familiar, he's the son, as you noted, of a former very popular Democratic governor who is close with Mitch McConnell, the very powerful Republican Senate leader. Andy Beshear also, who casts himself as, I'm the guy that makes the trains run on time. I'm the guy who gets disaster relief after we're hit by tornadoes. I'm not a culture warrior. I'm just a good governance governor.
Pragmatic, centrist Democrat. We got through COVID together. I get you through natural disasters. You know me, you know my family, you know I care most about Kentucky. Running against, Mitch McConnell has a great relationship with Andy Beshear, has a great relationship with his father, but this is a former McConnell staffer. This is a McConnell protege, Daniel Cameron. He would be, as you noted, the first black governor of Kentucky. He'd also be the first elected black governor in the United States. Mitch McConnell views him as the potential face of a post-Trump Republican Party, and yet, because this state is so Trumpy, what is Daniel Cameron touting in his ads? Trump's endorsement. And so he's the future in some ways, but his success in this election could be tied to Trump as well, promoting the endorsements.
First elected black Republican governor.
Republican governor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dana Bash?
Thanks, Jake and John. Look, this is a night that we are going to be looking at with all of the states and the districts inside of Virginia to see where the electorate is right now, 1 year out from 2024. We've been looking at polls. We have been talking to voters and listening to focus groups. But this is really going to be a moment where the voters are going to give us some breadcrumbs about what they want and what they don't want.
Yeah, and as these off-year elections often are, they try to really distill some of the political chaos, and I think probably this year feels even more chaotic than in many past years because of all of the different factors that are coming into play. It's the economy, it's abortion, it's the unpopularity of the incumbent, it's the unpopularity of the leader of the other party, the Republican Party, Donald Trump. But I do think that it is interesting that now for the second cycle in a row, we are seeing abortion playing such a central role in some of these key states in places where you would not expect it, basically in the South. And the fact that that is the case in and of itself, I think, tells you a lot about how unsettled this electorate is, how this is not where this issue seems to have always been, where Republicans have felt like they could run on it pretty safely and not had to worry about electoral consequences. That's really changed. So we'll see how that goes. But Biden is on the ballot in these states. Trump is on the ballot in these states as well, Trumpism. And those are all of the themes that are going to carry us into the next year. I think it might give us some clarity, but as we all often do, we just have to caution, there's still a long way between now and even next year. So these breadcrumbs might lead us to next November, but a lot of things could happen that could disrupt that path.
But they definitely will.
Well, that's why, I love Election Day, because we've been looking at the polls, we've been talking to voters, but when you actually get to see what they decide, that really is the most revealing and can give you a snapshot. It's not a prediction for what's going to happen next year. At this point, before the 2020 election, COVID had not even happened yet. So you truly have no idea. But it is interesting to see, is abortion politics still fueling voters the way that we've seen it happen since after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade? In Ohio, it'll be fascinating there. We just spoke to the governor of Ohio. He's a Republican. He's urging Republican voters, all voters, to not vote for that issue that would enshrine abortion rights in Ohio's Constitution. But in our early exit polls, and they're early, it is still seeing voters who have, a lot of anger, at least women voters, when it comes to the issue of abortion.
And in Virginia, the governor who's not on the ballot, Glenn Youngkin, is trying to get Republican control over the legislature by taking the abortion issue on head-on in a way that we haven't seen Republicans do, certainly didn't in the midterms.
Well, what's going on with Glenn Youngkin in Virginia is frankly what I'm obsessed with tonight. It's the storyline that I feel like has got the most engagement kind of across the board on all the issues. Obviously, in Ohio, abortion is critical as well. But is Glenn Youngkin giving Republicans a roadmap to run in places, where people don't like Donald Trump? Can he succeed in doing that? Can he be out front? Can Republicans run on abortion? He's giving them a potential roadmap. It's unclear to me whether or not voters are going to go for it. But, I will say the one thing, I've been talking to sources this morning, and the most interesting feedback I've sort of started to get, especially from Democrats, is that they are picking up that the electorate is just, one person used the word torched in an email to me, right?
What does that
are
mean?
Over it. They are exhausted. They are like, everything is weighing down on people, whether it's, the war in the Middle East, whether it's inflation, whether it's all of that. They're just exhausted.
And usually that means bad news for an incumbent or the incumbent party. But it's so mixed up right now because of where the parties are in these various, let's just focus on today, in these various states.
But we've seen that exhaustion before.
Yeah.
We saw it in 2020, we saw it in 2022, where in our exit polls going into both of those cycles, voters told us they didn't like either party, they didn't like either incumbent. They were dissatisfied with the direction of their political leaders. And yet, that was not necessarily predictive of voters voting in any one way or another. So it's an important feature these days, especially of the electorate. But how that will land is, I think, still
abortion is very emotional, right? And that's a key test here. Is that emotion still there?
A lot to talk about, and we have all night to do it as we see the votes come
Couldn't
in.
have better company, Dana.
Back at you. Jake. At any moment, we expect more votes to drop in the high-stakes Kentucky governor's race, and we're counting down to our first possible chance to make projections tonight. There is much more ahead on CNN's special coverage of America's Choice 2023.
Who is challenging the incumbent Democrat. Daniel Cameron is 814 votes ahead. He has 57.2% of the vote. The incumbent Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, has 42.7% of the vote. We don't even know what percentage of the vote this is going to represent because the votes The polls are still open in the western part of the state. This is just a little bit of the vote in, just a little shaving of it. But this is the vote that we have in as of right now. Let's go to Mississippi now, another governor's race where a Democrat named Presley is hoping to shake up the governor's race and unseat the Republican governor there. Tate Reeves, Diane Gallagher is covering all the action. She is in Jackson, Mississippi. And Diane, the king, Elvis, is he actually playing any sort of role in this race?
I can tell you that the Democratic candidate, Brandon Presley, has not shied away from mentioning his very famous second cousin. But what they say they're paying attention to more is exactly what you see here in Jackson right now. These lines that are sort of snaking around the New Jerusalem Baptist Church polling place that we're in at the moment. And part of that is because for the first time since 1890, voting for governor in Mississippi will be determined only by the popular vote. They amended the state constitution to reform the way that all statewide officials, including governors, are elected. Under the old system, candidates had to win a majority of the popular vote and a majority of state house districts. Now, voting rights groups as well as Democrats have long said that old process, that it diluted black voters. And Mississippi has the highest percentage of black residents in the nation. Now, look, Presley says that he has a diverse coalition of supporters that range from the Tennessee border all the way to the Gulf Shores. But I will tell you, Jake, that Democrats are watching here in Jackson as well as the Delta area very closely, saying they feel like black turnout could give them an indicator of whether or not the Democrat could potentially pull off an upset.
All right, Diane Gallagher in Jackson, Mississippi, thanks so much. We're getting some new exit poll information out of Ohio right now, and this is obviously a bellwether looking ahead to the 2024 election. David Chalian has those numbers. David.
Jake, as you know, Ohio has been leaning red of late in presidential politics, but we took this opportunity in our exit poll to get a sense of those showing up to vote in Ohio today, what they think about President Biden and Donald Trump. President Biden's approval rating in the Buckeye State, 41% of the voters today participating in this election, those who also voted earlier, represented in this exit poll, 41% approve, 57% disapprove. That's about what Biden's average is nationally. Then we asked folks, should Joe Biden be running for president? Look at these results. Nearly 3/4 of voters in Ohio today say no. Joe Biden should not be running for re-election. Only 26% of Ohio voters say he should. Donald Trump's not popular either, but his numbers are a bit better than the president's. 64%, nearly 2/3 of Ohio voters to say Trump should not be running for president. About 1/3 say he should. Clearly, this is not a matchup Ohioans are looking for. And when it comes to the issue of abortion, again, these early exit polls do indicate. We asked whether or not abortion should be legal in all cases, most cases. Look at the top two figures there, Jake. If you add up 33% and 29%, more than 6 in 10 voters in Ohio today say abortion should be legal in most or all cases. That is a robust turnout of the pro-abortion rights movement, which, as you know, abortion rights very much on the ballot there in Ohio, Jake.
Yep, absolutely. David Chalian, thank you so much. Let me throw it to Aaron Burnett in New York. Aaron?
All right, Jake. And, looking at these exit polls, Audie, I think one thing interesting, you see a shift. Not just that people care about this issue, but if you look at Ohio, right, as David was just saying, you add up people who think it should be legal, abortion should be legal in some or most cases, 62%. That was 51% in the year 2020. So you've seen actually a real and definitive shift in the electorate just in the past few years.
I think one of the things people should sort of keep an eye on over the next couple of months is how have both Democrats and Republicans altered their messages around abortion rights in the aftermath of the midterm elections. In the case of the Ohio ballot, it specifically mentions not just abortion, but about contraceptives, about other decisions related to a woman's body. And I think framed around the issue of would you want all these rights taken away and also abortion? It's a very different question and could explain some of the numbers we're seeing. But it's one of the things I'm keeping on the rest of the night.
And fascinating, David, because when you look at it, it's very clear where voters stand on this issue. And in Ohio, it's not that you're looking through this issue to get a lens on how people voted on a candidate, right? These are the issues that are actually on the ballot tonight.
Yeah,
abortion.
Audie nailed it, right? It's how it's being talked about, right? So Republicans blew it in 2020 in the past. Instead of saying, would you vote to codify Roe versus Wade, right? That's how it should have been presented, right? Because if you'd say, well, you vote to codify Roe versus Wade, people would say, well, sure, we'd do that, right? But that's not how it was presented, right? It was, Republicans went and said, this is a states' rights issue, let states do it. And then as soon as that happened, they said, wait, we want to take it away from the states. We want a federal ban. And
or in
vote,
each state, they said, we want a little
we
more.
We want more and more and more. We want to ban it. And so Republicans got burned last time, and now they're trying to walk it back a little bit. You see Glenn Youngkin messaging a little differently, right? We'll see if it works tonight. But Audie said, she nailed it. Democrats are onto something. You're going to see they're going to keep expanding that beachhead, right, on this issue, and we'll see if it continues to be salient tonight.
And listen, this was largely a hypothetical debate, the issue around life and abortion rights when Roe was the law of the land. That fundamentally changed under Dobbs. And you've seen how positions I have not seen a policy position move so rapidly on the right. The most pro-life, consistently pro-life Republican members now saying they would support 15 weeks, when it used to be, we want to throw Roe on the ash heap of history. That is because they are hearing from voters. Ohio was a red state. Trump won at 53 to Joe Biden 45.
It used to be like you couldn't get to the White House without Ohio. Then it became a red state.
It's very much a red state, but this is these exit polls mark kind of the national polling, which is about 69% of Americans favor some access to abortion.
All right, so David, if you look through it, though, and you say, okay, look through abortion, and is it a penumbra, as one would say, if you're going to look at abortion.
A little
I'm just looking at all
with these fancy words.
Your leather-bound books.
Trying to see what it is, what we can see through this.
Yes.
Interesting, in these same exit polls, you see people, should Biden be running in 2024 in Ohio? 72% no. Should Trump be running? 64% no.
Yes.
So there's great dissatisfaction with both. In fact, more for Biden if you look at it in this exit poll, even as the view on abortion itself is very clear.
Yeah, well, I think people are separating the question, and we'll see how it plays out in 2024. But, we've had 40 elections this year of different sorts around the country. In 38 of the 40, Democratic turnout was way elevated, and I think this has a lot to do with it. And you see it playing out tonight, not just in Ohio, but Andy Beshear's race has largely been attacking Cameron on abortion. And to Audie's point, you see his response has been to try and shift the discussion to parental consent. And you see Republicans doing it. They're searching for a way to fight back. But it is a powerful engine right now for Democratic turnout.
No, I mean, look, basically what you're seeing is abortion is the car. The Republicans are the dog that caught the car. Now they're getting backed over. We just keep backing over them because they went too far. And I think the only thing I think is interesting tonight is that you do have something that's the equivalent of a woolly mammoth or a dodo bird, which is a pro-choice Democrat in Mississippi, Presley, who the cool guy versus the crook in Mississippi. And actually, in that state, somebody who's a pro-choice person may actually elevate themselves. But across the board, I think the Republicans went too far.
And I think this is actually also an issue that opens up, it gives a little bit of a message opening for Democrats on other issues, too, because what you've seen is a Democratic message about Republicans taking away your rights, taking away your freedoms. That's really resonated. We see in this polling, people feel threatened specifically on abortion, but that also opens up credibility on other issues. And so, especially as Democrats are grappling with Joe Biden's lack of popularity in Ohio, for example, this gives them an opening to say, this is not just about reproductive health. This is also about a broader agenda to take away your rights. And so I think as Democrats are looking for ways to expand this beyond just abortion, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, it could be used as an issue that could help Biden, where obviously, when you look at these approval numbers and people wanting him to run, obviously struggling. All right, all staying with us through the night, and all of you, please stay with us, because we are getting closer to the end of all voting in both Kentucky and Virginia. We've got some new results coming in, and Dana going to be speaking live with the Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin about the Republicans' fight for control of the General Assembly, and of course, the ongoing speculation about his political future. We'll be back in a moment.
The battle for control of the legislature in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Jessica Dean is following that. She's in Richmond. Jessica, what is the Republican strategy as they try to flip Democratic seats?
Well, it's three-pronged, and Jake, some of it might surprise people based on what we've heard from former President Donald Trump and other Republicans. I spoke to a source close to the Youngkin operation, and they said they've really applied three key things here. Number one, aggressively encourage early voting and vote by mail. That's what's different than a lot of Republicans over the last several years. Travel into deep blue parts of the state, and also just keep Youngkin on a very consistent message. And that has been what they've tried to do again and again as they seek to flip the Senate, the state Senate here, which is currently held by Democrats. Now, I'm where the Democrats are going to gather tonight. Of course, they're hoping to do the opposite. But Youngkin and his team have really put a tremendous amount of resources, Jake, in expanding early voting for Republicans and in encouraging early voting and vote by mail for Republicans. So we'll see if that actually works to their benefit here. Democrats, of course, have a large advantage because their voters have been used to doing that. And he wants to obviously push an abortion ban that would be 15 weeks, with the exception for life of the mother, incest, and rape. That's something that Senate Democrats foiled for him. That's part of his agenda that he'd like to get through. Jake?
All right, Jessica Dean, thanks so much. Dana?
Thanks, Jake. And now let's hear directly from the Virginia governor about what's at stake tonight. Governor Glenn Youngkin, thank you so much for being here. You are not on the ballot. You are hoping, though, as Jessica was reporting, that you can win tonight so that you have a Republican-controlled legislature across the board. You've been out campaigning a lot. How are you feeling about what's happening on the ground?
Well, Dana, first of all, thank you for having me, and I feel great. And it's based on the fact I think we've had a great campaign by so many of our great candidates, and it really reflects a great 22 months in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We've delivered on every promise that we made, and today we see Virginia at the top of job growth, number 3 in the nation over the last 22 months, when we started out in the bottom third of job growth. 230,000 more Virginians working today than when we started. We've delivered $5 billion of tax relief during this time period. Right. And we promised Virginians we'd go to work to get the cost of living down in Virginia. And that's a track record that I think Virginians are going to the polls today. And I invite them to hopefully extend our license to lead, help us keep our House and flip our Senate so that we can do even more.
So you mentioned a lot of economic issues. One of the other issues that you have been and your allies have been pushing hard is the issue of abortion. And one of the most fascinating things about your strategy, Governor, has been the way that you are taking what a lot of Republicans in the midterms ran away from, the issue of abortion, and trying to address it in a way that a lot of strong anti-abortion groups were hoping. For example, as you talked about, I know today, saying that it is a 15-week limit, not using the word ban, and of course with exceptions after 15 weeks. Is your hope that not only that helps in Virginia, but that you're providing a roadmap for other Republicans?
Dana, abortion's one of the toughest issues in Virginia, and it's one of the toughest issues around the country. And as we presented our strategy and what we will absolutely deliver for Virginians, we wanted to be really clear that I support a bill to protect life at 15 weeks when a baby feels pain, at a time when exceptions can be made in the case of rape and incest and the mother's life is at risk. And I think this is a really important point because where the other side has been is to extend abortion all the way up through and including birth, paid for with taxpayer money. And so that was way too extreme for Virginians. And I think it was really important for folks to understand that this is a choice between no limits and reasonable limits. And across Virginia, while I know abortion is an important topic, the number one topic that I hear over and over again is how the Biden economy is making life so difficult. Nearly 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Inflation is stealing their hard-earned money. They're worried about jobs. And that's why I do believe that if we can come to a common place on abortion, we, of course, can bring to Virginians a reduced cost of living, tax relief, great jobs, excellence in education, safe communities, and that's what people want.
Yeah, and I just want to say that you mentioned that a lot of Democrats want abortion up until birth. Even in Virginia, yes, there are it allows right now, the current law allows for doctors to consult in very, very limited situations. But I want to turn to what this might mean for next year, for 2024. Donald Trump, he's still far and away the leader in the Republican primary. He endorsed you for governor back in 2021. Are you ready to return the favor, endorse him?
Well, of course, we are laser focused on 2023. And Dana, I'd say that I think there's still about 20 or 25 minutes left for Virginians to come out and vote. And I'd encourage them, please come out and vote and make your voice heard. Send me a team into Richmond that can work with me and not fight against me. We can get a lot done.
Are you going to endorse?
And Dana, after polls close, I'm not going to endorse anyone. I think that voters should choose who the nominee is. And then, of course, I will support the Republican nominee.
Are you going to get in at all? Any chance in 2024?
Dana, I've been asked this so many times over the course of the last year. I'm humbled by it. I'm focused on Virginia. We've got a lot of work to do. And I think tonight we're going to demonstrate that the work that we've been doing has been not only appreciated by Virginians, but they're willing to give us our majority back in our House and help us flip the Senate so we can do even more. This is so important for Virginians, and I think it's important for the nation to demonstrate that we, in fact, can take a state that just 24 months ago was completely controlled by Democrats, and with common sense policies, we can turn the direction and take it from falling behind to leading. And that's one of the most important things I think we can demonstrate today and going forward.
Thank you, Governor. I didn't hear a no there. Didn't hear a yes, but didn't hear a no. Governor, thank you so much. Appreciate your time tonight. Jake.
Thanks, Dana. And as the governor noted, we are just a few minutes away. We're closing in on the first votes from Virginia, where polling places are closing at the top of the hour. We're also getting closer to unveiling CNN's new 2024 presidential poll and what it reveals about a potential Biden-Trump rematch. It's all coming up as voters are casting ballots across the nation. Stay with us. %. The incumbent Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, is at 49%. A lot of votes still to be counted. In fact, a lot of polls are still open there. Let's walk over to the magic wall where we can talk to John King about some of the results coming in from Kentucky, as well as what he's seeing in the great state of Ohio. John.
So let's start with Kentucky. You made the key point. It's 3% of the estimated vote, so we got a long way to go in the count.
A lot of counting.
And this part of the state, the central time zone part of Kentucky, is still voting for another 15, 16 minutes. But we love to count votes. And so you have a very close race so far. We expect a very competitive race here throughout the night. Not much to make of what we see so far, except that the votes are starting to come in. I say that because if you look here, Jefferson County where Louisville is, Fayette County where Frankfort is, then you start moving over here, Paducah, Owensboro, Bowling Green. About 25% of the state population lives in Jefferson and Fayette, right there. So there's no votes in from the biggest population centers. If you look at the other dots on the map, that gets you over 30% of the population. So we have a long way to go here. But what are we watching for? Number one, here and here is where the governor, the Democrat, Andy Beshear, the incumbent, needs to run it up. Those are your African-American base, your Democratic Party, the close-in suburbs that have become so Democratic. That's where he needs to run it up. But Andy Beshear, family brand, we talked about this earlier, family name, very well known in the state, has a unique brand. Can he overcome the Biden drag? We'll see that in the suburbs as it plays out. You mentioned Ohio. Polls closed there at the top of the hour. It's a ballot initiative on the map there. So obviously it's an empty map right now. Here's the question, should the Ohio Constitution have a constitutional right to abortion, right? And so what are we going to look for? Remember, Kansas sent the first shockwave here. After the Dobbs decision, Ruby Red Kansas said, whoa, Supreme Court went too far. A lot of Republicans said Supreme Court went too far. Republicans looking to ban abortion, you're going too far. That's what Kansas said. Will another red state say that? If you look at the 2020 results here, the presidential race, Donald Trump won this state by 8 points. It is a red state. Pockets of blue, you see them around Cleveland, but here's what I'm looking for. Oops, sorry about that. You come to Lake County, right? A more conservative suburb outside north of Cleveland up along the lake. Some of the suburbs here around Toledo and the more exurban areas as you move out that Donald Trump carried. That's what we want to watch tonight. In the Democratic blue areas, the abortion right forces are going to win. The question is, as we saw in Kansas, as we saw in Michigan, do more conservative Republican suburbs and exurbs say, no, Supreme Court, you went too far? Dan was just talking about the implications of this in Virginia. We'll get a lot of clues tonight about voters in a blue state presidential level, but a Republican governor of Virginia, a very red state here in Ohio. Are Republicans, especially Republicans in the suburbs and the exurbs, saying, whoa, that went too far?
Yeah, we've seen 6 states go in the abortion rights direction since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and 3 of them are Republican. We've seen Kentucky, we've seen Kansas, and we've seen Montana all go in that direction. Straight ahead, a critical round of poll closings. We are standing by for results when all voting ends in the Commonwealths of Kentucky and Virginia. Tonight's contests are teeing up the 2024 election as we're about to release CNN's exclusive new poll on President Biden, former President Trump, and the 2024 presidential race. First, we're going to squeeze in this quick break. Stay with us. Almost 20,000 votes ahead. Governor Beshear has 58.2% of the vote. The Republican Attorney General Daniel Cameron has 41.8% of the vote. That's with 8% of the estimated vote in. Still a lot of votes to count. We're standing by for the last polling places to close in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Voting is also about to end in Virginia, where we are following a very consequential battle. GOP Governor Glenn Youngkin and his party are hoping that Republicans can win full control of the Virginia General Assembly, the House of Delegates. That would clear the way for Youngkin to advance his conservative education agenda, as well as his proposed restrictions on abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Virginia's off-year elections are often seen as bellwethers of bigger presidential battles ahead as we close in on the end of voting in Kentucky and Virginia in this year. Let's check back in with Eva McKend, who is covering the governor's race in Kentucky. She's in Louisville. Eva, what are you hearing from Democrats about what is driving their votes?
Yeah, Jake, what has been remarkable to see is abortion really serve as a base motivator for Democrats here in Kentucky. We met voters that are really fired up about this issue. And it's not that these Democratic voters in places like Fayette and Jefferson County wouldn't have already been inclined to support Democratic Governor Andy Beshear. It's that this really got them to pay attention to this off-year election, and that is so vital at a time when only about half of the state's registered voters are expected to participate. That is why we saw Governor Beshear center this so much. He has this searing ad that played featuring a young woman who was the victim of sexual assault as a way to illustrate that Republicans, many of them in this state, including historically Daniel Cameron, do not accept exceptions for rape and incest, and that is actually the current law here. So we've seen this become a hugely galvanizing issue for Democrats here. We have to see now by how much, and if this is going to be the issue that brings the governor over the edge here, Jake.
All right, Eva McCann in Louisville, Kentucky. Thanks so much. Let's go to Ohio now, where we find Kyung La, big abortion rights referendum on the ballot there. And Kyung, what are activists on both sides of this issue expecting this evening?
What they are expecting this evening is that it is going to be very, very close. That's what I've heard from both sides, that they expect that the early initial returns, because the early vote will be counted first and it tends to favor Democrats, that it will favor the pro-issue one advocates, enshrining abortion rights into the Constitution. But as the night wears on, it will be a question of whether that lead can hold. That will be the big question. If it does, what we are hearing from the issue one advocates, the pro-abortion forces, what they are saying is that there will have been one message that will be tested here in Ohio and will have rung true. It is that the government needs to stay out of the personal lives of voters. That was the message that they pushed all along. They are very aware this is a Republican-controlled state, that they need Republicans and independents, libertarians to come out and support this measure. If they are successful, that is the message that will win here.
All right,
Jake.
Kyung La in Columbus, Ohio. Thanks so much. And I'm back here at the Magic Wall with John King. And John, we saw Governor Beshear, the Democratic incumbent, jump ahead as the votes came in. Where did this new batch of votes come from?
And it went from a very close race to what is a healthy lead right now. It's only 10% of the vote, so everybody stay with us as we go. But how did that happen? Well, last time you were here, I was saying the major population centers, we had nothing. And now we do have Jefferson County by far. It's more than 17% of the state population. We finally got some votes in there. Still only 16%, but you see This is number one, your Democratic African-American base. Number two, your close-in suburbs, which have trended Democratic. The question for Governor Beshear is, can he keep them? Can he keep them in this election? Right now, it's 76%. When he won an election 4 years ago, he was at 67% in Jefferson County. So at the moment, he's overperforming. If he stays near that number, he'll be reelected. But again, 16%. Largely early votes. They tend to be Democratic, mail-in ballots and things. So let's wait and go through. But he's doing what he needs to do so far. That's Jefferson County there, and then you come over here to Fayette County, where Lexington is. Again, it's your second largest county in the state. He's running at 80%. If you go back 4 years ago, I think he was in the high 60s. Let's go back and take a look. 66% 4 years ago when he beat an unpopular incumbent governor 4 years ago. But if you're Andy Beshear and you're looking at this now, you're at where you're above. If he stays there, game over. But again, it's 20% of the vote, and these tend to be what you get the mail-in early ballots, which tend to be Democratic. But if you are him, you're meeting your metrics. If there's one place you're worried about, but it's only 20% of the vote, Campbell County up here, Cincinnati, Ohio. These are suburbs in northern Kentucky. They're essentially the Cincinnati suburbs. Andy Beshear won this last time. Donald Trump won it in 2020. It's only 2% of the state population, but if you're always looking in a rematch, an incumbent running again, can he match his map last time? This is a county he did win last time, so we'll keep an eye on that. If he keeps running up the margins like he is in Louisville and Lexington at the moment, he could offset that. But you're at 11%. So we have a long way to go, but Governor Beshear is grateful to see the big early margins in the population centers.
Can I see how he did 4 years ago up there in those Cincinnati suburbs?
Yeah, sure. So if you come here, Andy Beshear carried these suburbs. He carried them both. You look at Campbell County here, and you look at, come over here, come back this way. Why are we stuck? Well, let me come out and see. All right, there we go. Campbell and Kenton. There, that time it came up. Sometimes she plays tricks on you. You see Andy Beshear just barely, right? Just barely. But if you look at, you come to the 2020 presidential race, Donald Trump won these quite healthy. So that has been the Beshear brand. He can compete in traditionally Republican areas. The question is, can he keep that going tonight as you're heading into 2024, as you have the incumbent president as a Democrat underwater? He just flipped it. See, if you stay at the magic wall long enough, now you're up to 32%, and he flipped it. So that's why we say that's for me, fun. I know partisans at home don't find this fun when things are jumping around. Because
we like the voters to have
this is why live on election night, while you're standing here, things can change. And while this is the most important number, that's significant. You're meeting your early metrics. If you're Andy Beshear at the moment, you're happy. But you also know you have a long way to go in a very, very competitive state.
So if you're Daniel Cameron, what are the areas that you're looking for to drive up count? Obviously, you want to eat into Beshear's count in the population centers, but what are some places you really want to drive up your vote?
So you pick a rural county here, right? You come out to the more rural areas. 30% of the vote in, so we're having a hypothetical conversation. We need that number to get higher, but he's at 59%, right there right now, and you see the number. There's an off-year election. It's not going to match presidential turnout, but you want to juice this up. Look at the presidential race in these counties when you come in here now, right? Donald Trump gets 80%, 81%, right? Daniel Cameron needs to track Trump. If Andy Beshear is running strong in Fayette, in Jefferson, in the Democratic areas, and if he's close to where he was 4 years ago, even in the suburbs, then Daniel Cameron essentially has to, in the rural areas, track Trump. But this has been Andy Beshear's gift. If you look at, go back to the 2019 race, right? This is Andy Beshear in 2019. See all this blue? See all this blue out here? This is a Democratic governor in a very red state running strong. Now try to find it when you look at the presidential race. Joe Biden only won 2 counties. Joe Biden won 2 counties in Kentucky. Andy Beshear, when he ran for governor, won a boatload because of the brand, the family name. The question is, Jake, can he come close to matching this?
All right, John King, all voting is about to end in Kentucky and in Virginia. Kentucky's Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, is seeking re-election, and CNN is saying that it is too early to call. The polls closed at 7 p.m., and it is too early to call the governor's race in Kentucky. We're also going to say that in Virginia, it is too early to call the General Assembly. No surprise, the polls just closed. It is too early to call the General Assembly. There's a ferocious battle going on right now. Let's walk over to the panel, and we'll talk with Abby and Dana and Caitlin and Casey about what's going on. I have to say, the Glenn Youngkin interview was really interesting. One of the things that's so fascinating is he is trying to steer a path for the Republican Party that is a non-MAGA path. He had a boot camp. He picked 10 candidates in divisive primaries and conventions. He went 10 for 10. He took them to this boot camp. He had a debate coach. He tried to encourage them to accept that Joe Biden won the 2020 election, which would be something that you would think you wouldn't have to get people to agree to. And they're all very, very conservative. I'm not saying that they're moderates, but they are not MAGA candidates per se.
Yeah, and that's, of course, if you look at any of the ads that Democrats are running, that is the template, that all these Republicans are MAGA candidates. And maybe I'm misreading this, I'd love to get everybody else's take. What I thought was really interesting is, despite the fact that Youngkin is leaning in and having the candidates lean into this notion of, if you elect a Republican full legislature, we will pass a 15-week limit, not a ban, but a limit on abortion. When I asked him about how things are going, he talked all about the economy, not about abortion. When I asked him about abortion, he talked about it and then turned to the economy.
He's
I don't know what
on defense.
I don't know what that says about what he's seeing.
It's very clear that he is in the final days trying to look at this and say, oh, I got to change the subject. Like, we'll see how the results play out, but if you read how his body language is shaping up, it's going to be a rough night.
He also described it as an issue that they can get to a compromise on, to move on and talk to other things. That's a really interesting way of framing it, almost as if it's like, let's just put aside these controversial, issues that are basically the third rail of politics and have been for some time, so that we can get to the stuff that I think we're on more solid footing on. And I'm not sure that's really going to work, because as we've been discussing, this is a front of mind issue for voters, for Democratic voters certainly, but for a lot of more moderate voters, particularly women who actually are very open to Republican policies, but on this issue, they have been coming out in state after state, and they have been saying, we do not want to go this far. I would be curious, I'm curious to see about a 15-week abortion ban, even with the exceptions that they've laid out, because a lot of voters have not really wanted the government to even go there, even if they personally believe that abortion should not happen.
It is an interesting test case, because they're playing in the suburbs on that very issue.
Yeah, and I think part of the line is being blurred on when we talk to candidates about how many weeks of an abortion ban that they would support. I think right now where voters seem to be, and tonight will be really revealing to see where they are in 2023, is just hearing abortion ban, period, makes people think of the fact that in some states there are near total bans on these abortions. Virginia is one of the last southern states where there isn't a near total ban. And I think part of the question has been, was he wise to introduce this 15-week idea that he's been pushing as more moderate, calling it a limit? It's still a ban after 15 weeks, even though they're changing the language on it. The question is, how do voters respond to that? And was it wise for him to go and to push this? Is it a successful route? I don't think it's totally clear.
The other thing is, whatever he wants, whatever Governor Youngkin wants to call it, and whatever the candidates he's picked are now agreeing to, the Democrats get to say what they want to say, too. And for those of us who don't change the channel when the commercials come on, that's all the Democrats are talking about in the state legislative races. That all the Democratic ads are about abortion. 100%. This Republican delegate candidate, this Republican state Senate candidate is going to ban abortion, period, full stop. That's entirely what Democratic candidates, at least in Northern Virginia, what they're running on.
The problem is that if you are going to try to carve a non-MAGA path for the Republican Party, you have to give the base something. And that's, I think, why Youngkin has ended up in this place on abortion. They have to offer the base something on this issue that is a bedrock of modern-day Republican politics. That's a 15-week abortion ban is actually not a very Trumpy thing, but it is central to the Republican base, and I think this is why this is a test. If you take Trumpism and election denialism out of the picture, can you do enough to motivate Republican-leaning voters to get them out to the polls and bring in more moderates? We'll find out, but that is what he is testing right now.
But, you know, it's interesting you say it's MAGA, and I think this is a little bit of a Rorschach test, because, yes, if you are very, very conservative on the issue of abortion, you could say, okay, it's pretty good. It's, you know, at least there's a ban or a limit, whatever you want to call it, starting at the second trimester. What he's trying to do is appeal to suburban women or people who are looking at the abortion issue and saying, you know what, I don't think that there should be abortion allowed in an unlimited way, but they also don't think that there should be a total ban. They're trying to find
the word he used was compromise. I don't know if it exists.
The fall of Roe versus Wade was an absolute political disaster for Republicans.
Yeah.
It just was. Yeah. It was an absolute political disaster. They have to figure out how to grapple with it. Glenn Youngkin wants to have a national profile. All the ads he aired in Virginia, they were not about these individual candidates. They were about Glenn Youngkin, right? He fronted this. This was supposed to be the springboard for his whatever he's going to do next on the national stage, whether that's now or in however many years. And it's really looking like it didn't work. And I mean, to Abby's point, he is caught between a Republican base that cares deeply about this issue and the realities of trying to win voters in the suburbs. I mean, this is why Democrats have been doing so well.
And it's not just the suburbs of Virginia. As we've seen, it's the voters in the suburbs in Kansas
City,
and in
Columbus,
and Kentucky.
Yeah.
We're going to see what happens in Ohio tonight, in Montana. The truth of the matter is that there are a lot of Republicans throughout the country, including in red states, that do not approve of Roe v. Wade being overturned.
And a smart Republican also mentioned to me that this is going to be on the ballot in Arizona in 2024, which is a critical swing state.
Well, it'll be on the ballot in a lot of states if it's successful.
But Arizona being, very, very important as a swing state.
More votes ahead as we're on the brink of getting the first results on that abortion rights ballot measure in Ohio, and we're moments away from revealing the results of CNN's exclusive new 2024 presidential poll. I know what it says. Don't you want to know? It includes a new snapshot of Biden versus Trump 1 year before the potential rematch. That's after this break. You're going to have to stick around to find out. Stay with us.
Beshear, the Democratic incumbent, is ahead right now, 58.2% of the votes so far. Daniel Cameron, the GOP challenger, current Attorney General, right now at 41.8%, and as you can see, just over 20% of the votes are in already. So that is the key race alert there as those votes start to come in, and counting just tightening a little bit in these past few moments. All polls, of course, now closed in the state of Kentucky. And as we are watching that state, a crucial one tonight, we're getting our first look at the results from CNN's new 2024 presidential poll. Our political director, David Chalian, is here with the very first of this, and we're going to be going through this, David, through the night because there is a lot of substance in this poll. Let's start with what you see as the biggest headline here.
Yeah, Aaron, there is a lot in this poll. And again, this is a poll. It's a snapshot in time. It's a year out. But it is instructive as it sets the stage. Take a look at the horse race here between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. You see that Donald Trump has a narrow lead among registered voters, 49% to 45%. That's just outside the margin of error. I want to show you some key groups that were critical to Joe Biden's election as president in 2020. And they are not at the level of support that he needs them to be. Take a look here at independents. You see 45% Trump, 41% Biden. That was a Biden plus 13 group in the 2020 election. These are registered voters. It's a poll comparing to actual voters in 2020, but instructive. Take a look at black voters, 73% Biden to 23% Trump in our poll. That's a 50-point lead, except Joe Biden 3 years ago won black voters by 75 points in that election. Latino voters, basically dead even here, 50% Biden, 46% Trump. That was a group Joe Biden won by 33 points. And look at young voters. They are deadlocked. 47% Biden, 48% Trump. That was a very strong Biden group. He won them by roughly 24 points just 3 years ago. Some key attributes, key qualities of the candidates. The strong qualities here for Joe Biden. Respecting the rule of law. 51% of our poll respondents say that applies to Joe Biden. Only 35% say that applies to Donald Trump. Honest and trustworthy. You see that Joe Biden bests Donald Trump by 9 percentage points on that score. Flip it to Donald Trump's strongest attributes. An effective world leader. He is 12 points ahead of Biden on that score, 48% to 36%, and has the necessary stamina and sharpness to serve as president. Only 25% of our poll respondents, a quarter, say that is true of Joe Biden. Double that, 53% say that is true of Donald Trump. And just in terms of motivation, Aaron, We are seeing in our poll that Republican and Republican-leaning independent voters, 71% of them extremely motivated to vote. 61% of Democrats and Democratic leaners say so. That's an enthusiasm advantage. And finally, neither one of these candidates are popular with the American public. Look at their favorable numbers. Joe Biden's at 36% favorable, 59% unfavorable. Donald Trump's at 38% favorable, 56% unfavorable. And when we look at those who say unfavorable opinion of both of them, Donald Trump is actually winning them in this poll by 9 points. And he did win that group back in 2016 of what we call the double haters, those that didn't like Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. That was part of his path to the White House in 2016. Here, he is also winning with the so-called double haters, Aaron.
The double haters, the double negative turning out to be a positive for him. All right, thank you very much, David Chalian. All right, and as I said, there's so much substance in here. Let's get straight to our panel to go through what David just shared. So, Kate, obviously, you know the president well. You've spent a lot of time with him. This is obviously a grim poll for him on every front. But I want to highlight one thing David Chalian just said. When you break it down by independents, black voters, women, and young voters, 18 to 34 right now, Trump is winning by 1 point. Call that a dead heat. Biden won it by 24 points last time around. That's a stunning slide.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is not a good poll for Joe Biden. The best thing in this poll for Joe Biden is the date on it, which is November 7th, 2023, and not 2024. It's not a great poll. However, there are things here that I think give him a pathway, show a pathway for him. So he obviously has a lot of work to do with some of the core components of the Biden coalition, including voters of color, including young voters. But we're seeing in results as they're coming in tonight, there is incredible enthusiasm and energy for the Democratic position on issues like abortion. We know that there's enthusiasm on issues like climate. There are issues that speak to young voters where Biden and the Democrats have an opportunity to draw a really strong contrast. So no question that he has his work laid out for him. No question the campaign knows that. I know from talking to folks on the campaign, they certainly don't have their head in the sand on this. But I think given what we see here about people's faith in Biden as somebody who's honest and trustworthy, which gives you a credibility opening. People are open to hearing from you if they believe that you're truthful. And then on these issues that we're actually seeing play out in real time in elections, where we know Biden and Democrats have the more popular
So can you hitch your horse to an abortion issue or something? Van, okay, but drilling down here, Kate, touching on some of these issues with young voters, independents, black voters, Latino voters, Biden's winning 50 to 46. He won it by 33 points last time around. Black voters, 73 to 23. Biden won by 75 last time. And one point there to go a little bit deeper. Among black men, Trump actually wins by 3 points in this poll, 49 to 46.
Shocking. It's shocking. First of all, overall, the Biden-Harris coalition could be called the Humpty Dumpty coalition right now. Just falling apart. Just falling apart. The Latino vote on the ground, the youth vote on the ground, the black vote on the ground. This is not good. Now, there is a year to turn it around. The black male, that's a stunner. Black women have been in the lead, but black men haven't been that far behind. I think you've got a constituency that is losing hope and looking for change. There's a lot of the things that black men were voting for didn't happen yet. Nothing yet on voting rights, nothing yet on police reform, nothing yet on criminal justice reform. So a lot of those issues that were important for black male voters haven't been addressed yet, and the economic pain is real. The last thing I'll say is a lot of black male voters are non-college working folks. And some of the stuff that is non-college working, that's working for white working class guys, can also work for black working class guys. But you can't just expect for black men to stand in long lines, or black women to stand in long lines, get nothing done on policy specifically to them, and then stay in this coalition.
Alyssa, there's also the reality of some of these points that David just went through. Respects the rule of law. Okay, Biden crushes Trump on that. Honest and trustworthy. He does better, but only by 9 points. Effective world leader. Trump, significantly better than Biden.
This stood out to me. 48% think that Trump is an effective world leader as opposed to Joe Biden's 36%. Now, I traveled with President Trump. You know, to some degree, a president is victim of circumstances. Joe Biden is governing at a time Israel and Hamas are at war. Ukraine is at war. He's dealing with a world that feels like it's on fire. But my caution to the Biden folks is I think these numbers actually only risk going down for him. Progressives on the left are not where Joe Biden is with Israel. Now, granted, I'm much closer as a Republican voter to where Joe Biden's been on Israel, but most Republicans are not going to flip from Republican position on it. So I think that that's what I'd be keeping my eye on. But at a time when, whether it's China and Taiwan, that Trump is seen as a more effective world leader is stunning, and it was a big part of the campaign message. We're going to be democracy. We're going to be the party of democracy. We're going to rebuild the NATO coalition, and we're going to lead on the world stage. And that's just not translating to voters.
You don't think they pulled Kim Jong-un, do you? Listen, I just want to say one thing about the thing that nobody's discussed here. I mean, Kate said the best thing about this poll is the date. I think the best thing probably is that Trump is terribly unpopular and therefore deeply vulnerable himself at the end of the day. But the date that people are looking at is the date on the president, and that is reflected in this poll. And that's the hard part, because it's a hard thing. You can fight on issues, and I think Democrats have the high ground on issues, and you're going to see it perhaps tonight in the results in these elections. We don't know yet, but it sure feels that way. But how you deal with that, and it becomes a strength issue. I mean, I'm stunned, honestly, by the effective, leader in the world, because Joe Biden has shown great leadership. He should be given strength points, and they're not giving them to him.
Yeah, real quickly, I was just going to say, the one question here, the whole race comes down to this question. Has the stamina and sharpness to serve effectively as president? That's the race. That's the race. And Kate, to your point,
25% Biden,
1 year from now,
Trump.
that's not getting any better. That's going to get worse. You can't fix that number.
But part of what Trump is benefiting from here on all of this is sort of receding to the background, which is a crazy thing to say about Donald Trump, but it's true. It's true. When Donald Trump is front and center and he is making all sorts of bombastic, crazy statements every day, it will feel like more of a contrast.
But
and that's what's not reflected in this.
Audie, quickly.
I think you have a point. Trump is just not on stage, so it's easy to have hazy memories about what he is actually like.
Stamina,
and I don't think
Trump's
stamina is going to improve either.
I'll stay with, because as I said, we've gone through a little bit of this, and there's a lot more to talk about. And we are just minutes away from the end of voting in Ohio, a crucial new test of voter sentiment on abortion, these issues that the group is talking about here, how it may play into 2024. Those results, plus a vote there also on legalizing marijuana, all ahead.
$1,384 votes ahead, with 56.3% of the vote over his Republican challenger, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, who has 43.7% of the vote. That's with about a third of the vote in right now. We are also closing in on the first results from Ohio, where voting ends just minutes from now at 7:30 Eastern in one of the most closely watched contests tonight. Voters in red-leaning Ohio are deciding whether to amend the Ohio state constitution to establish in that constitution a right to an abortion. A yes vote would make Ohio the 7th state where voters backed abortion rights since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last year. This is an important test of this issue for Democrats, who are making abortion rights central to their message in 2024. Ohioans are also making a choice on whether to become the 24th state in the United States to legalize recreational marijuana use for adults. With just minutes to go before voting ends in Ohio, let's go over to John King, who has more on the vote in Kentucky. So, John, Governor Beshear is maintaining his lead. I am wondering how much of this is just because of the early voting and how much of this is because of the vote that is coming from population centers that are generally Democratic.
It's all of the above, in the sense that, you do have votes coming in. Jefferson County, by far, 17% of the population, the largest county, the most Democratic county. He's at 70% there, only 22% of the vote. And so, let's see if Cameron can income. The early votes tend to be counted first. They have been, for years, disproportionately Democratic. We don't know if that's the case tonight, but they have been. So you're looking at the two largest counties, Jefferson and now Fayette here, Lexington and the suburbs around it. And Andy Beshear, in the votes counted so far, is more than meeting his metrics. This is up to 84% of the estimated. So if he stays above 70% here, as this plays out, that's a very strong Democratic turnout. And number, the number, we got to look at the math, compare the math to turnout off your election, but it's a governor's race. Here's your question, though, right? So you see all the gray down here. That means we have no votes, right? So let me draw a line. We have a lot of gray over here. Let's just come through this and do this all the way across the state. Nothing there, right? Many of these are small rural counties, so there's not a lot of math. But let's just go back in time to 2020. Let's go to the presidential race. That's Trump country, right? That's Trump country. So will conservatives vote for Daniel Cameron, and will they turn out, not in presidential numbers, that's not going to happen, even in a governor's race, but can they get turnout in those counties? So we don't know the answer to that question yet. So we have to wait to see, number one, how big are Cameron's margins by percentages, but number two, the math. Because you need, just like when Trump does in competitive states. This is not a competitive state presidentially, but in a competitive state, Republicans need to run it up in the rural areas, not just with the percentages, but with the math to offset the big urban areas that are going overwhelmingly so far for Andy Beshear. But again, only 22% here. Cameron, the state attorney general, one of the questions, Andy Beshear is incredibly popular with the Democratic base, big African-American base in Louisville and in the Lexington and the Frankfurt area. Can Daniel Cameron, the black attorney general, cut into that at all? He's been on the statewide ballot before, so it's an interesting question when you have two people who've won statewide running against each other. But at the moment, the governor is more than meeting his metrics. We talked earlier about the Cincinnati suburbs up here. This is more rural, more exurban, over here. Campbell County. You come to Kenton County here, Covington. If you've ever flown into Cincinnati, that's your airport is actually in Kentucky. You drive across the bridge. Andy Beshear's talked a lot about that bridge, right? Yes, he worked with Joe Biden on that bridge, but he also worked with Mitch McConnell on that bridge. He has talked a lot about this bridge right here, saying, I get things done. That's not a Democratic bridge. It's not a Republican bridge. I get things done. So the question is, can he sell that brand in what is a tough climate? David Chalian was just going through the poll about Joe Biden. If Joe Biden's numbers are that bad nationally, imagine what they are in the state of Kentucky, right? And so, Jake, part of the challenge is, can a popular incumbent Democratic governor sell his personal brand and overcome what in Kentucky would fairly be the Biden drag? We'll see.
All right, John King, thanks so much. And we are just moments away from the end of voting in Ohio. And we have a key race alert for you. It is too early to call on a constitutional right to abortion in the state of Ohio. Voters there going to the polls to decide whether or not to enshrine abortion rights in the Ohio state constitution. Let us go to CNN's Jeff Zeleny right now. He's in Miami. That is the site of tomorrow's Republican presidential debate, the third. Jeff, how closely are the Republican candidates following tonight's results, especially on this contentious issue of abortion rights?
Well, Jake, the Republican candidates and, in fact, leaders across the Republican Party are watching these results very carefully on abortion, particularly in Virginia and Ohio, even a Supreme Court race in Pennsylvania. And here is why. They are mindful of the landmines that abortion created for the Republican Party in the 2022 midterm elections. For decades, of course, abortion was a motivating factor more on the Republican side. That changed dramatically after the Supreme Court decision in the Dobbs case. So Democrats, of course, are holding this out as one of their top opportunities, they believe, to fire up their own voters. So the candidates are watching this very carefully. And there are some differences between the Republican candidates, as we will hear at the debate tomorrow night here in Miami. Nikki Haley, for example, the former South Carolina governor, the former UN ambassador, has struck more of a middle ground. That has really helped her earn some support in suburban areas with some suburban voters. Even Donald Trump, the former president, has said privately to advisors that he believes abortion is a losing issue, so he does not stress that very much at all. Of course, here in Florida, the governor, Ron DeSantis, he has signed a 6-week ban. But, Jake, this is why it matters. At a 30,000-foot view, as Republicans try and win control of the Senate, hold control of the House, and win back the White House, abortion could be front and center as well. It could also be on the ballot in places like Arizona, here in Florida, even in Missouri. So the outcome of the abortion measures tonight certainly will play a huge role in our politics for the next year. Jake?
All right, Jeff Zeleny in Miami, Florida. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You know, the idea that Donald Trump is trying to avoid this, when with the exception of Mitch McConnell, there is no one person more responsible for the overturning of Roe v. Wade, more than Donald Trump, is just remarkable. He is the one who appointed those 3 justices who were the key votes, who overturned Roe v. Wade.
He created a list of judges based on.
Well, he didn't create it.
Oh, he didn't create it. He endorsed a list of judges based on largely their view on this issue. He picked from that list, as he promised, was able to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. But don't forget, Donald Trump, before he was running for president as a Republican, was actually a pro-choice Democrat on this issue. So I don't think that a lot of Republicans, if you know his history, are totally surprised by that. He's also, in some ways, very politically astute about what works for him politically. And he sees what we all saw in 2022, which is that this is not an issue that worked for Republicans. Even Republicans who were playing in these races, who saw what was happening day to day, they thought that they were on good footing, and then election night came and it didn't turn out that way. So Trump is seeing that, and he's looking out for Trump. And a lot of these Republicans on the right who supported him, the Susan B. Anthony list and others, are frankly furious with him about how he's positioned himself. But the reason he's not backing off is because he's looking forward to 2024, and he doesn't think it's.
Let me just interrupt for 1 second, because if anyone at home who caught me peering over there,
Yes.
we have some votes coming in. We have 2% of the vote in from Ohio, and again, this is just a small fraction of the votes in. But the constitutional right to abortion has taken an early lead with 78.8%. Well, now it's 75.8% saying yes. 24.2% saying no. That's a 59,819 vote lead. Again, that's just 3% of the vote in. We have a lot of votes to count out of Ohio, but that is some raw numbers that we have.
Yeah, and in the other referenda that we've seen, it's been about 58-59% in favor of abortion rights. And that's one of the things that's really interesting about Ohio, is to see if it's going to be the same. And remember, there was an earlier attempt to raise the threshold to make it above 60% in order for this to go through, which failed. And that just gives you a sense of how the people in Ohio who are against this, who are anti-abortion, understand, even in a red state, which effectively Ohio is. It's not totally. It's pretty red. Sherrod Brown doesn't want to hear that, but it's on the presidential level. It has been for several cycles. And so, as you said, now it's 3%, and it's very, very early. But not only will the total be interesting, but the final percentage.
I also think the way they're messaging it is so interesting to me. The amendment is about 200 words. It's very straightforward. It's really easy to read. It's not actually on the ballot. Instead, it's a summary by the Republican Secretary of State, who is pushing that raising the threshold in August, which failed fabulously. And so we were talking to the Ohio governor earlier about this, and if they think that it's just the amendment itself, the constitutional right to an abortion in Ohio's constitution is what voters should vote against, that language is not actually in the ballot. And instead, they've talked about late-term abortions being allowed, even though, of course, the CDC says only fewer than 1% of people in the U.S. get a late-term abortion. They've talked about parental rights, even though the Republican Attorney General in the state has said there's no mention of parental rights in this amendment. So the messaging on this has been really confusing. And so I do think it'll be interesting to see what the takeaway is from voters and how close the margin is, regardless of which way they vote.
I think the fundamental thing here, all of the language, the messaging is confusing. There's a lot of numbers thrown around, 15 weeks, 6 weeks, this, that, the other thing. The fall of Dobbs just created this fundamental difference in reality where Republicans are no longer galvanized by this issue the way they were because they won the fight. They've kind of laid down their arms a little bit. The voters, I mean, the groups have not, but they have a much harder time galvanizing voters to get out on this. The same way Democrats had trouble convincing people that no, they really did actually have to work harder to protect Roe versus Wade. The Democrats now have all the cards on this, and fear is an incredibly motivating force in politics, as much as we don't want it to be. And Democrats are more afraid right now than Republicans are.
And look, I think there is a difference. I was in Kentucky talking to Republicans about their referendum on abortion. There's a difference for a lot of voters in what they personally believe and what they want to see in the law in their particular state.
Well, there was always a nudge, nudge, wink, wink that Republicans would convey to voters. Like, we're never going to really actually overturn Roe v. Wade. People may not remember, but before the 2004 election, Laura Bush, the first lady, even kind of suggested, I think it was on the Today Show, that maybe she was even kind of pro-choice. I mean, there was always just this suggestion that Republicans weren't really ever going to do anything about it. And guess what? The anti-abortion forces in the Republican Party, they heard that. And they said, no, we're serious about this. And that's when Donald Trump signed off on that list that you were just talking about. We're closely watching those early results from the abortion rights ballot measure in Ohio. And the first results from that Mississippi governor's race are just around the corner when polling places close at the top of the hour. Coming up next, Aaron Burnett will press Senator Tim Scott about his uphill fight for the GOP presidential nomination against Donald Trump amid questions about whether a Trump-Biden rematch is all but inevitable. Stay with us.
Vote 331,000 plus votes. Daniel Cameron, the Republican Attorney General, trailing right now, 46.7. You see these results are dynamic and moving as we speak. But right now, just in these past few minutes, we've gone up to 40% of the vote reporting there. In the state of Ohio, two crucial measures on the ballot. The one here, abortion. Right now, with just about 5% of the vote in, you can see 66.7% of voters in Ohio are supporting that constitutional right for abortion. Just a third of voters are voting no. Very few votes in right now, but that is consistent with the exit polls as we saw them on that issue earlier this evening. As we stand by for more votes and more information coming in here, I want to bring in the U.S. Senator and Republican presidential candidate Tim Scott of South Carolina, and he joins us all from Miami tonight. Senator, I very much appreciate your time, and I just want to start with some of the information that we're getting out of our latest poll here at CNN. Look, you've repeatedly said, Senator, that a main reason not to have Donald Trump as a Republican nominee is that he isn't electable. 2 weeks ago, you said, quote, I don't think he can win in a general election. The latest poll that we have here now, though, does show Trump narrowly leading Joe Biden in a head-to-head matchup. The New York Times poll, of course, over the weekend showed Trump leading Biden in 5 of the 6 most crucial battleground states. Does all of this show to you that Trump is, in fact, electable at this time?
Well, what it says in that same poll is that a generic Republican, someone like myself, a unique, qualified, optimistic Republican, does even better than the former president. So what we know is if we want a red wave from the top of the ticket to the bottom of the ticket, we have to have a candidate who persuades independents to join us and from a consistently conservative platform to change America into all that we can be. And that means we're focusing on restoring hope, creating opportunities, and protecting the America we all love.
All right, I want to drill down on a couple of points here in this night, of course, before a presidential debate that you will be on the stage for. But first, one more point from our CNN poll that just came out that stood out. It does show that 23% of black voters choose Trump. Now, that is nearly double his 2020 levels in some exit polls. Interestingly, in our poll, if you drill down, Senator, and Van Jones was saying this stunned him, but if you drill down, men of color, Trump wins 49% to 46% in our latest poll, actually wins men of color. And I hear you say, wow. I mean, how do you even respond to that? And what in your record makes you think you could do better than Trump?
Well, I've already done better than Trump in my own home state, but here's the fact. I was on the south side of Chicago just a few weeks ago. I had an opportunity to go to an inner city church and preach the gospel. One of the things that we see with African-American voters are that they are sick and tired of being told by the Democrat Party to sit down, shut up, and to vote blue. They want results. They want quality education for their kids. They want to make sure that there are entrepreneurs and jobs in the community. On the south side of Chicago, we saw an opportunity for artists and contractors to be trained. We saw the opportunity to improve the quality of education. That message resonates. What we saw in 2016 to 2020 was a 50% increase in black votes for Republicans. I believe that any Republican, any great opportunity party candidate will poll better and attract more minorities into our party because of the challenges that we see with Joe Biden and the dereliction of his duty and the optimistic, positive message that is resonating within the black community, especially with black men.
I want to ask you about Iowa because the governor there obviously has made a decision to endorse Governor DeSantis. You say you're all in there. Kim Reynolds, of course, did endorse DeSantis. And at a stop today, she said, I welcomed candidates. They had their chance, referring obviously to you and your other rivals. A new Des Moines Register poll has you right now in 4th place in Iowa. Do you still think you can win there?
Yes, absolutely, Aaron. One of the things I've learned is that the more time I spend in Iowa, the better we do. We continue to do town halls. We'll be back there on Thursday. I'm excited to get back to the state. I do believe that the road to the White House runs right through the evangelical base of Iowa voters who will be turning out in the caucus. I've got a couple of months to make my case, and we're going to use those months to make my case and become our nominee.
I want to ask you one more question here about some developments on the Israel front, and I know you've been very outspoken about that. The White House today did say that the President Biden does not believe that Israeli forces should be reoccupying Gaza after this year, and that, of course, came in response to Prime Minister Netanyahu's comments, in which he said specifically that Israel will have overall security responsibility in Gaza for, the crucial word, Senator, is an indefinite period after the war. So an indefinite period of security and occupation. Do you support that, or do you agree with the Biden White House that is not appropriate?
Well, there's no question that what we should remember is why Prime Minister Netanyahu has to talk about Gaza in this fashion whatsoever. It's because Hamas created the greatest travesty of justice since the Holocaust against the Jewish people. Their objective is to wipe Jews off of the planet, giving Prime Minister Netanyahu and the state of Israel all the time they need to wipe Hamas off the map is our only objective at this point, making sure that there's a shoulder-to-shoulder relationship, no daylight, so that Prime Minister Netanyahu can continue his objective and to do it successfully. And the faster he accomplishes that objective, the more lives we actually will save.
Senator Tim Scott, thank you very much. I appreciate your time tonight. All of us do.
Thank you, Aaron. God bless.
All right, and we are just minutes away from 8 o'clock Eastern. That is when polling places are scheduled to close in the state of Mississippi. And there we are awaiting the first result in a red state showdown between an incumbent Republican governor and a person who happens to be a second cousin of Elvis Presley. You won't want to miss that.
Defeating Democrat Buddy Wheatley, and CNN is projecting that in the Attorney General race, Russell Coleman, the Republican, will defeat Democrat Pamela Stevenson. That is an open seat, the Attorney General, because the incumbent Attorney General is running for governor. Let us all also check out, of course, what is going on in the key race alert we have here for the governor's race in the state of Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Democratic incumbent Governor Andy Beshear, with 50% of the vote in, remains ahead, 39,520 votes ahead, with 52.7% of the vote against the Republican Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who has 47.3% of the vote. That is 50% of the vote in. Let us look at Ohio right now, where there is a referendum on whether or not there should be a constitutional right to an abortion in the state constitution, with 13% of the vote in. Yes is ahead by more than 175,000 votes, 67.7% for yes. No has 32.3% of the vote. So far, yes is in the lead. Yes would, of course, enshrine abortion rights within the Ohio Constitution. But again, there is still 87% of the vote left to count. We're standing by for results from more key races across the country that could preview the political trends in 2024. In deep red Mississippi, for example, the big question tonight, does conservative Democrat Brandon Presley, the second cousin of Elvis Presley, have a shot at defeating the Republican incumbent Governor Tate Reeves? Tate Reeves, who has been caught up in a corruption scandal. Presley has National Party funding and name recognition because, of course, of his second cousin. A new rule requiring candidates in that state to get a majority of the vote means this governor's contest could go to a runoff for the first time ever. We are also watching a high-profile mayor's race in the great city of Philadelphia. Democrat Sherelle Parker is poised to become the city's first ever female mayor. The former city council member faces Republican David O. History also could be made in Houston, Texas. Prominent Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee is aiming to be the first black woman elected mayor of Houston. She and Democratic State Senator John Whitmire are leading a crowded field in the nonpartisan mayoral contest there. A new wave of results are coming at the top of the hour. But until then, let's go back to John King. John, this Kentucky race is fascinating because CNN was able to call the Secretary of State and Attorney General races for the Republicans pretty quickly. We are not able to do that with the governor's race.
You're not able to do that, but you just said 2 Republicans have won statewide tonight, and yet the Democratic governor is leading by 5 points with about a little more than half of the vote estimated counted. That tells you something right there about the strength of the Andy Beshear brand and the strength of his campaign in a year when you talked about the national poll, and this is a very red state. If Joe Biden nationally, his numbers are as bad as they are nationally, you know how bad they are in Kentucky, right?
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, you're right. And so here's Andy Beshear right now doing more than he has to do. Again, 53%. We need to wait and we need to go through. But in the big Democratic areas, he's running it up. He got 67% here 4 years ago. He's getting 69% at the moment, only a quarter of the vote. If he stays close to that, think about the math. It's the state's largest county.
Just popped up to
30%, and he went up to 70% right there. And so you come back in here right now. You just look, the map is filling in. Joe Biden won 2 counties in this state. 2 counties in the state. Look at all those blue counties. Andy Beshear right now is filling in the map, a ways to go, but a Democratic governor, a tough climate. At the moment, looks like he's on a path to re-election. We'll count the rest.
All right, let's go to Diane Gallagher now, who has some breaking news out of Mississippi. Diane, what are you learning?
Yeah, Jake, a Chancery Court judge just extended the voting hours here in Hinds County, a very populous area in Mississippi, by 1 hour, meaning that polls will instead close at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central Time. The judge, in his order, said that a number of precincts in Hinds County ran out of ballots during Election Day and are continuing to run out of ballots, and others may run out going forward. I'm reading from this order that just came down, noting that it takes time to deliver more ballots to the precincts. And look, Jake, you can see, I mean, we have plenty of people who are waiting in line here. They still have additional time to get out and vote. And this is something that I was just speaking with a Democratic Party official here in Hinds County who told me they were very encouraged by turnout here. This is something that the Presley campaign was looking at as well. Look, the Tate Reeves campaign, the incumbent governor, has said that they feel that they have run a race that is heavy on his accomplishments, as well as working to tie Presley to national Democrats. But look, they are encouraged, the Democrats here in Mississippi, by the turnout they are seeing so far. The precinct captain that we just spoke with at this location says she is seeing close to double what she saw in the past elections at this particular location. They're looking at high turnout, and now here in Hinds County, an additional hour to get the vote out because of those ballots running out. The Secretary of State did issue a statement noting that his office is not responsible for ballots. That is the county offices, but that they are in constant communication with local officials and relaying those complaints from the election protection line to them, noting that normally they have Mississippi law charges counties to present just 60% of the active voter count, and they will continue trying to get those ballots as these precincts run out here in Hinds County. Jake.
Fascinating. Diane Gallagher, thank you so much. Nothing can get out the vote more than the idea of possibility, I think.
Look, you have a lot of attention because it's Elvis Presley's second cousin, but here's a Democrat, conservative Democrat, running in a very Republican state, 20-plus years since a Republican governor, talking about health care, talking about taking the Medicaid money from Washington to give health care to working people. Health care, we know, has in recent elections been a huge turnout. Now we're talking about abortion a lot, but before the Dobbs decision, it was health care that was helping Democrats turn out votes. Does it work in a place like this? We shall see. But I just want to show you where she is. She's Jackson here. This is Hinds County. It is by far the #1. It's the largest, most populous county of the state. It is about 8% of the population, and it is, if you go back in history to the presidential race, Joe Biden did not do well in the state of Mississippi, but he did in Hinds County. Yep. So the fact that they just have voters in line, if you're the Democratic candidate, in a Democratic county, that you have voters in line, that the court said, give them an extra hour, let's let people vote, that would encourage you. I want to come out to the main map because, look, this is not a kind state, has not been a kind state to Democrats, especially at the presidential level, but even at the statewide level in a very long time. So, votes in Mississippi. We do hear another one. Again, in this tough national climate for Democrats, you have an incumbent Democratic governor in a very red state, 56% of the vote in now, right? I told you earlier, watch down here. And a lot of them are starting to slowly fill in, right? These are the conservative counties. But Daniel Cameron getting only 51% of the vote there. Let's just go back in time to 2019. Andy Beshear getting 46%, so the incumbent doing a little better. But here's what you look at here. Go back to the presidential race, Donald Trump getting 74% here. And so the margins are not going Daniel Cameron's way if you know that in the urban areas that Andy Beshear is running it up.
But take it back to Matt Bevin, if you could.
Pick one. Here we go. Yep.
So,
Matt Bevin, 2019.
So Matt Bevin, 2019. But the thing to point out here is that Matt Bevin was incredibly unpopular.
Yeah.
So the idea that Daniel Cameron, and again, this is early. The votes are still coming in Muhlenberg County.
So let's come to real time. So remember that 4,500 votes for Matt Bevin in the full election.
52%.
52%. You come back here where we are now.
So he's underperforming as of right now. It's still but he's underperforming Daniel Cameron, Matt Bevin. And again, this is going to be filled in. He's going to do better than that. But
could be early ballots, which tend to be more Democratic. But to your point, here's another way to look at it. Here's the race filling in right now, right? And so this is compared to 2019, right? Is Andy Beshear overperforming himself? Yes. In every one of these counties, even the ones that are red, Andy Beshear at the moment, 56% of the vote in. This can change. But at the moment, he is running ahead of his election 4 years ago in most of the state. If you're an incumbent and you're overperforming your last election, again, we have to see how much of this are mail-in ballots, how much of this are early ballots. There's more to come. But if you're Andy Beshear at the moment, you're looking at this map, you're winning those two counties up there I told you about. You know, Trump won, Andy Beshear won. Can he hold them? He's holding them. He's adding to his wins out here, more blue counties than he had last time at the moment as you do it. But if you're in the Beshear headquarters, you're now up to 56% of the estimated vote. He won by 6,000 votes last time.
Right.
He's ahead by 45 plus, 46 plus now. A ways to go, but if you're a Democratic incumbent in this climate, you like what you see on the map.
Right. And again, early yet, we still have 44% of the vote yet left to come in. My point is Daniel Cameron is regarded within the GOP, and even, I think, just within political circles in Kentucky, nonpartisan ones, as something of a superstar, right? He is regarded highly as somebody with a very bright political future. You do not want Matt Bevin to be overperforming you in any way, shape, or form. He was a political dud.
Well, he was a dud who also had some institutional Republican state problems because he ran against Mitch McConnell in the Tea Party primary, and then he became governor, but a lot of Republicans still didn't like him.
Right.
And McConnell didn't like him because he ran against him in a primary. He lost, but then he became governor. So yes, Cameron is much more liked in the party, and you see the numbers. You know, we have to get to the final number, but you're right. He's considered a rising star, a rising state star, who they like to be a national star for the Republican Party, was as one of the Republican attorneys general. That if Andy Beshear can hold on to this, you know, he's not a very flashy guy, right? He's not, you know, a lot of people say, oh, he's boring, oh, he's dull. Oh, guess what? If he holds on to this, he's going to get a lot of attention of how did you do that here?
Right. And again, the caveats, he still could win. I'm not saying he won't. And if he doesn't, he still could go on to become a senator and a president.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything along those lines. I'm just saying he wants to be doing much better right now than he is right now.
Yes. He's not running up numbers in the rural areas where Trump did so well. Again, he's at 59%. You go back to the presidential race right there, Trump's at 77.
Right.
It just shows you that Andy Beshear is competitive with Republican voters. Joe Biden's getting 22% in this county. Come back to where we are now, Andy Beshear is getting 40%. So again, and that's 80% of the vote in that one Ohio county. So Andy Beshear is proving that people who voted for Donald Trump for president are voting for Democrat Andy Beshear for governor. It's plain and simple.
Show me some of the other Democratic counties where Andy Beshear needs to really drive up the vote.
So here's where you just run it up, and it's only 30% of the vote. Again, we talked about this. Remember we were doing the presidential race, and we had such a small percentage of the votes in Philadelphia, and Joe Biden had 80%. Well, you only have 30% in, and he's getting 70%. Now, again, it's disproportionately early voting. They're Democratic, so watch if it stays. But if he got 67% in Jefferson County, it's 17% of the state population. He got 67% 4 years ago. If he's at 70%, he's going to win the election. If he stays at 70% or near 70% just because of the population. And so he's above his metric there now. You move over here to Fayette County, again, they're up. So there's two ways to look at this. He's getting 72% of the vote, which is 3 or 4 points higher than he did 4 years ago. You're almost done. So there's not a lot more math coming in there, but that's more than what your metric was. If you were using Matt Bevin as your metric, he's ahead of that. And again, up here in two counties, Donald Trump won both of these counties against Joe Biden. Andy Beshear, it's 10 points. It's 10 points, but it's 10 points in a place Donald Trump won, come to the presidential race, by almost 20.
Right.
By almost 20. So you have Andy Beshear proving in places. I mean, I'm going to do this again. This is Andy Beshear. All those blue counties right now, he's leading. We're not done. We have to still count votes. That's Andy Beshear's ability in red state Kentucky. That's Joe Biden's. 2. 2. It's a red state. It's a conservative state. Joe Biden was never going to have a chance here. But this is the state that early in 2016, when the results started to come in Kentucky, this was our first clue that we knew Donald Trump was going to win in 2016, but the turnout. He was outperforming Romney, outperforming Bush. People were coming out of the woodwork to vote for Donald Trump. So Kentucky does give you clues about enthusiasm. And at the moment in 2023, in this national climate for Andy Beshear, at the moment, again, to be fighting this off with a 44,000 vote lead is quite impressive. One other quick point, if I can, I just wanted to come to Ohio. On the constitutional right to abortion, it's leading quite comfortably right now, including Donald Trump won Lake County. We used to go out all the time when Ohio was competitive. People would go out to Stark County as a swing county in Ohio. It's where Canton, Ohio is. People would go out there and say, this is your bellwether county in America. Donald Trump won it quite handily. It's not a bellwether county anymore. It's a Republican county. And yet, 64% at the moment, 20% of the vote in Stark County, 20% of the vote in statewide in a state Donald Trump carried handily. A lot of this up here was red for Trump. It's green for yes on abortion rights.
Go back to Kentucky for 1 second, then I'm going to throw it to Dana. Just the one other thing, just when it comes to bellwethers, and we don't know how this night is going to end for either Mr. Cameron or Mr. Beshear, but the last 5 governor's races in Kentucky were bellwethers for how the country was going to vote for president the next year. The last time Beshear won, a Democrat, Beshear won, a Democrat took the White House, and all the times before that. How Kentucky goes in a governor's race for the last 5 cycles, the White House followed their lead. We'll see what happens next time, and we'll see how it goes tonight. Dana Bash.
Thanks. Very, very interesting. And just on that note about Kentucky, how the voters are going to go is what we're watching. But also the 2 candidates, the characters who are watching in Kentucky, are each very, very interesting because they're both young and they're both unique. I mean, obviously, Daniel Cameron is an African-American running as a Republican in Kentucky. And then Andy Beshear, if he wins, will be a second-term Democratic governor in Kentucky. So no matter who wins, it will be an instant national profile and looking at them for what it means for the future of their parties.
Also, the question of, what politics matters. And as Governor Beshear has tried to kind of localize the race to a degree, that is not what Daniel Cameron has tried to do. He's tried to tie Andy Beshear to President Biden multiple times throughout this campaign. Based on the numbers right now, and who knows, we'll see what they look like. I mean, that doesn't appear to be working. And remember when Daniel Cameron won a very crowded primary, there were a lot of Republicans who wanted to run against Governor Beshear. He came out and said, the MAGA culture, the Donald J. Trump culture is alive and well in the state of Kentucky, and Trump obviously endorsed him in this race. That does not appear to have helped him at this point based on what we're seeing right now.
I just want to say, as we're talking about Kentucky, the polls in Mississippi did just close at the top of the hour. About 9 minutes ago, we're waiting for those votes to come in.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kentucky is such an interesting example of how voters can sometimes hold multiple thoughts in their minds at the same time. It's a state that has been basically power sharing at some of these state level positions for some time. Andy Beshear, a Democrat in a pretty red state where he has a Republican Secretary of State, a Republican Attorney General. We just called the Secretary of State race and the Attorney General race for the Republicans tonight. So that could very well continue. Sometimes, and we have to remember this, sometimes voters are not totally driven by ideological concerns. And in fact, in some of these states, and we see this sometimes in Virginia actually quite a lot, they like to see their government kind of split up so that there isn't full control over the levers of power by one political party, and particularly at a time where the mood is so incredibly negative and sour. I think we could be seeing so much more of that as we go forward. I think that's what we saw in 2022 when Republicans were expecting a red wave and voters said, hold on. we're going to split this up a little bit because we think both parties need a check on their power in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. Kentucky, first of all, still has, and I kind of love this because as our politics have flattened and become national, right, it's mattered a little less what's going on in a state. Beshear is a family name in Kentucky, right? It's got a long tradition of having Democrats, having Democrats win in statewide offices. So there's some of that still at play here, which I think, makes for a little bit more of an interesting thing. I had one smart Democratic source point out that they think in their numbers that voters are still looking at how people handled COVID, and people felt good about how Andy Beshear handled that then, which I thought was potentially interesting. But I think big picture, what does this say about Joe Biden and what might happen in 2024? I kind of wonder if it doesn't give a little bit of credence to the argument they're trying to make that Joe Biden has been continually underestimated. And at the end of the day, he's going to come out on top, because we did see that. We have seen that. And, the numbers are so bad in the polls that I don't necessarily always want to give this to them when they're, trying to spin us and tell us, no, this is fine, it's all going to be fine. But the reality was we did count him out after New Hampshire. He came back. There have been several instances where that's happened. Part of me wonders if the trend that you note, if it's continuing, what does that mean for him?
Well, the votes are still coming in Kentucky in the governor's race, as we were just talking about, also on the abortion rights ballot measure in Ohio. We are also waiting for the results to start coming in Mississippi, where polls closed almost 12 minutes ago. And we're digging deeper into CNN's exclusive new poll, the bleak message for President Biden from a disgruntled electorate.
Democrats are leading in 40 seats. Republicans are leading in 43. You need 51 of those seats to control the House of Delegates. In the Virginia State Senate, Democrats are currently leading in 17 seats. Republicans are leading in 18 seats needed to control the state Senate of Virginia, 21. Right now, Democrats control the state Senate. Republicans control the House of Delegates. There is an effort by both parties to control each one. We're getting more results from CNN's new 2024 presidential poll, and CNN's David Chalian has those numbers. David, what are voters saying about the job President Joe Biden has done as president?
Jake, the country has soured on Joe Biden. There's just not another way to put it. According to our latest CNN poll conducted by SSRS, a national poll gives us this snapshot in time. Biden's approval rating is 39% in our poll. 61% disapprove of the job he's doing. Look at it by party. You see that even among his fellow Democrats, he's only at 77% approval in this poll. Only a third of independents approve of the job he's doing. And of course, as you might imagine, only 5% of Republicans. How are things going in the country today? Badly, say nearly 3/4 of respondents in this poll. 72% things are going badly in the country today. Only 28% say they're going well. Again, that astonishing number on whether or not Biden has the stamina and sharpness to serve effectively as president. Only 25% of poll respondents say that he does have the stamina. 74% say no. And I know you're a history buff like I am, and so look here on this chart of where Biden's modern-day predecessors were in their approval rating at this point in their presidency. And Jake, you see, Biden is down there between Donald Trump and Jimmy Carter. You may know that is down in the category of one-term presidents. He clearly wants to turn that around, and he's got a year to do so, Jake.
All right, David Chalian, thanks so much. Aaron Burnett throwing to you in New York.
All right, so let's talk through some of this. David Axelrod, let's start with where David Chalian just finished. The territory of one-term presidents.
Yes.
Going back to Jimmy Carter, I had jotted this down. Jimmy Carter was at 32%. That's worse.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's about as good as it
and
can
he
get.
lost. Look, the difference here is that he isn't running against Ronald Reagan. He's not running against some fresh face. He's running against Donald Trump. And that's what gives him hope. And I think
Who is the
also
only other person at that low level, close to that low level.
I mean, his
your point.
numbers are equally bad, though. On in other polling and in some here, there are comparatives, as we talked about earlier on this, foreign leadership question and so on, that are discouraging. I would only say this. Whether it's fair or not, and Joe Biden has a lot of accomplishments to his credit. He led the country through the pandemic, and while inflation is still the prism through which people are looking at the economy, on jobs and some other measures, he's done quite well. Despite all those facts, he and maybe no incumbent president at this juncture is going to win a referendum on their own performance. He has to frame the choice, and he has to frame it aggressively, and he has to frame it right away, because if nothing else, these are a flashing red light here.
So David went through independents, and I just want to say overall, of course, right now, you've got independents, political independents, 45% Trump, 41% Biden. And as David was just laying out, only a third of independents think that Joe Biden is doing a good job. There are many who make the argument that independence is where you win and lose, that people end up going to their corners, and independence is where a race is lost.
Independents are very affected by the sort of distance to when the election is going to be. It's a year out. We don't know how close they're paying attention and what they see in a Trump, for example.
That's the calculation they're making.
One of the things I think I'm most compelled by is that, and David and I talked about this earlier, Barack Obama grew his electorate, right? He broadened that coalition. But I don't ever remember anybody saying Joe Biden was added to the ticket because he really drew the youngs and the BIPOCs.
But he did do very well among the youngs.
Maybe, but I don't think it was Biden.
By the way, the one place he's doing well in these polls is among voters over 65.
Exactly.
By the way, I know what you're shaking around. I know. Are you about to do it again?
I'm not going to go back to my Chalian board. I'm just going to say the one thing that can't be fixed. The thing that can't be fixed is stamina. The other point I just want to put that number to point out: 71 to 61, right? The enthusiasm gap David talked about. That's substantial.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I think there's a return. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Audie. Go ahead. But can we just go to what is actually happening tonight, right? So we have voters voting tonight. We have a long way to go. There are a lot of votes still coming in. Obviously, a lot of races yet to be called. A lot going on. But so far, we are seeing lower Republican turnout than was anticipated. We are seeing Democrats turn out. We obviously see the numbers in Ohio. Abortion clearly motivating voters. So, there is a lot of opportunity here. Yes, is there work for Joe Biden to do on these numbers? Of course. I think he would say that if he were sitting here. But there is an enormous opportunity for him because these issues, there's enormous space for him to grow. And so I think we should, rather than looking at a poll a year out, which, yes, does it have some informative information? Of course it does. All polls do. But no poll is definitive. But people are voting right now.
I've been trying to make sense, and I apologize because we've just been torturing Kate tonight, but I've been trying to make sense of this number that is a dream to Republicans, where voters ages 18 to 34, Trump is outperforming with them. Gen Z and millennials are the two biggest voting blocs going into this election. That is not traditional that they would be siding more with the Republican candidate over the Democrat on issues, whether it's climate change, reproductive rights. They tend to skew liberal. I think it goes back to the magic issue of age. And despite the fact that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are only 3 years apart, perception becomes reality in politics.
So there are, of course, as we all know, in the political discourse in this country, Van, Democrats who say that anyone who votes for Trump somehow is some sort of a closet racist, or that no Latino would vote for Trump because of the wall and his immigration policies. And yet in those two groups, that is not what you see at all in this poll.
That's because these groups are not monolithic. Part of what's going on here is that there's a college, non-college dynamic happening among people of color. Sometimes it looks like a gender gap because you have more black women with college degrees than black men. But there is a college, non-college dynamic here. And I think what you're beginning to see is the working class is beginning to slide more and more toward the Republican Party. And that's something that I don't think that Democrats are prepared for, have responded to well yet. Sometimes Democrats seem like we're the party of people who eat a lot of kale. Right, that's the most important criteria.
Wait, you don't?
and want to teach you how to eat.
Exactly. So there. But the good news is this. But here's the good news is this. We're a year out. The good news is that we are a year out, and I am glad that we're getting this news on this election night and not one in a year from now.
All right, all stay with us. Still ahead, will Democratic Governor Andy Beshear's lead hold in Kentucky? The crucial question right now is more results are coming in there. And standing by right now for the first big round of results in the Mississippi governor's race. We'll be back with all of that in just a moment.
Of both the Virginia House of Delegates and the Virginia State Senate. In the House of Delegates, CNN can project the Democrats have won 23 races, while Republicans have won 18 so far. A reminder, 51 seats are needed to control that chamber, which is currently controlled by Republicans. In the Virginia Senate, CNN can project that 5 Democrats have won their contest compared to 6 Republicans. 21 seats are needed to control the Virginia Senate. Let's look at the other boards that we have going right now. A key race alert right now at the Kentucky governor's race with 65% of the vote in. Incumbent Democratic Governor Andy Beshear remains ahead by 38,387 votes with 52% of the vote in. Still ahead of Republican Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who has 48%. We are still waiting for 35% of the vote. Let's look at Ohio right now, where there is a referendum to put a constitutional right to abortion in the state constitution. The yes right now is far in the lead with 22% of the vote in, 235,720 votes ahead, to be precise, with 63.4% of the vote. No has 36.6% of the vote. In Mississippi, with just a little bit of the vote in, the Democrat Brandon Presley is ahead by 537 votes with 71.4% of the vote. Incumbent Republican Governor Tate Reeves has 26.6%, but that is just a few votes. We're still waiting for some serious numbers to start coming in Mississippi. John King, you're looking exactly at what I want you to be looking at, which is Kentucky. We have 66% of the vote in. I know we're still waiting, and I know that anything could happen, but boy, Governor Beshear's got to be feeling pretty good right now, I would think.
Very good. Very good. Look, there's no reason to get way out ahead of the numbers, right? That is a path. Your eyes tell you. Your eyes don't lie to you. You have a Democratic incumbent in a very tough climate who just barely won last time by about 6,000 votes, who's 37,000 votes ahead with 52% of the vote. 52-48, that's a 4-point race. It's competitive. So you could say, why don't you call it? Well, because he's ahead. Let's just say he's ahead. He's running an impressive campaign. He's meeting all his tests. But you see the gray? There are still 13, 14 counties last time I counted where we have no votes yet. No votes. Most of them, I'll just pop one up randomly. Monroe County, bottom half of the state, there's 120 counties in Kentucky. This one's 97th in terms of population, 0.2% of the state population. So there are not a lot of votes there. So Daniel Cameron could get 60 or 70%. It's not a lot of math. However, you come over here, Daviess County. This is the 7th largest county in the state. It's about 2.5% of the statewide population. So you wait, just to be cautious, especially in an age when people are questioning election results or questioning, is the media getting out ahead of itself? Let's just count votes. Let's just count votes. But if you're in Andy Beshear headquarters right now, you're looking at that and you're thinking, we not only met our metrics, in a lot of places we're exceeding our metrics. I did this earlier and I said, is he overperforming how he ran 4 years ago, right? And I said, let's be careful because we were at about 50% of the vote then. So let's look at it again, right? Let's click that up here. Just about everywhere. I mean,
explain what we're looking at right now because I don't understand.
So every one of these counties that is illuminated, Andy Beshear is running stronger now than he did 4 years ago when he won in 2019. So even in these red counties, even in places where Daniel Cameron is winning, Andy Beshear is doing better than he did 4 years ago. So you say, wow, he's getting whipped here, right? Whooped. But he's doing better than he did 4 years ago. If you come back here and you look and you come in here, 29%, it's 27%. So you might not think that's a big deal, but
it adds up.
It adds in these small rural counties. That's how Trump wins in places. You see these small rural counties. Trump runs it up with huge numbers. Any votes Andy Beshear can get in these red places is bonus. So you take that off and you come back to the real vote now. This is the full vote. That's 2019.
Right, I mean, that rural county you had, he's up like about 1,000 votes than where he was last time.
Right.
There's 120 counties.
120 counties. So if you're up 50 votes here, 60 votes there, overperforming last time. And so then if Andy Beshear is doing that, then Daniel Cameron's only option is to take it back in places like this, right, in the Democratic areas, and he's not. Andy Beshear is running ahead. He was 67% in Jefferson County, by far, largest, most populous county, 17.2% statewide population. He was at 67% 4 years ago. He's running at 72% now. So if it's a simple way to look at it is Andy Beshear is getting, even in these red places, he's getting votes. Some of these not competitive, but he's getting votes. And Daniel Cameron is not chipping into his margins in the Democratic areas. And again, this is what Andy Beshear is doing at the moment. And you just look at this state. Joe Biden won 2 counties. He won Jefferson and he won Fayette. Andy Beshear is winning. He's even adding, it's not done yet, but he's winning more counties now than he did 4 years ago, which tells you as an incumbent governor in a tough climate, he's been able to sell the brand, sell that message that this is not about Democrats or Republicans. This is about getting through COVID together. This is about building roads together. This is about dealing with disasters together against a strong candidate. A guy he's won statewide. He's the Attorney General.
Superstar Republican. People have a lot of hopes and dreams for him. Even if he does not win tonight, you haven't heard the last of Daniel Cameron. Let me ask you a question that we're going to hear from some Biden-supporting Democrats tonight and tomorrow, assuming that Andy Beshear's lead holds, which is this Andy Beshear defying the Biden drag, or are we underestimating Joe Biden? I mean, I know what I think, and I think I know what you think, but there are going to be Biden-supporting Democrats out there who say, why aren't you giving Biden credit for what's going on here with Andy Beshear?
Because Joe Biden won 2 counties in this state to start. And, it's okay. When I first started doing this, my first campaign was 1988. Kentucky had Democratic senators. Kentucky was considered semi-competitive.
Are you referring to Wendell Ford?
On the national, Wendell Ford was from, and so it's not anymore. Nationally, it is a red state. However, look, Kate Bedingfield made the point earlier, right? If Democrats have a good night tonight, does that tell you that running on issues like abortion, Andy Beshear, but he also was running on his name and his brand. The Biden brand is not strong right now. The Biden brand is not strong right now.
But the issue template might be strong.
On the issue template, maybe. Yes, maybe, especially, again, Joe Biden's, we come to the initiative in Ohio. I'm not going to posit tonight that Joe Biden is going to be competitive in Ohio. That's not a criticism of Joe Biden. Donald Trump won Ohio by 8 points. It's been trending Republican for a long time. However, right now, with about a quarter of the vote in, the constitutional right to abortion, right? Donald Trump won Lake County. Donald Trump won Stark County. Donald Trump won a lot of these green counties that are voting in favor of abortion rights. That issue is working for progressives, abortion right forces, Democrats, call them what you will, but the issue is working for them. The issue clearly worked for Andy Beshear, who, it's interesting, we don't have exit polling in Kentucky. It would be fascinating to have a study in Kentucky after this, how much of it is the Beshear brand, which in Kentucky is a lot stronger than the Biden brand, right? It's a family name. It's a legendary family in the state. And how much of it is issues? That's a great study and a great debate. Let's get through the election first.
2 closely watched governor's races in Kentucky and in Mississippi unfolding right now as Democrats test their strength in these red states. More votes coming in. Stay with us. The lead, he is 397 votes ahead of his Democratic challenger, Governor Reeves, with 56.4% of the vote. Democratic challenger Brandon Presley, who is second cousins with the great Elvis Presley, has 41.1% of the vote. Now to CNN's Jessica Dean. You want to go to Kentucky? Okay, so the Kentucky governor's race, the Democratic incumbent governor there is 52,168 votes ahead with 52.4% of the vote. Still ahead, still leading over to the Attorney General, the Republican Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who has 47.6% of the vote. That's with 74% of the vote in. We're still waiting for about a quarter of the vote in. But Governor Beshear has had a commanding lead for much of the night. In Ohio, where Ohio residents were voting on whether or not there should be a constitutional right to an abortion, whether the state constitution should be amended, the yes votes with a commanding lead with about a quarter of the vote in, 219,784 votes ahead. Yes with a 61% vote count as of now. No with 39%. yes with a commanding lead, as it has had all night. We still have about 3/4 of the vote to come in. Now we go to CNN's Jessica Dean, who is in Virginia, following the high-stakes fight for the control of the General Assembly, the House of Delegates, and the state Senate. And Jessica, you have a special guest.
Yes, I do, Jake. As we are waiting for all of these results to come in, just to give everyone the state of play, as we went into election night, every House and Senate seat in the state of Virginia up for grabs. And currently, Democrats hold the Senate, Republicans hold the House, and of course, Democrats are hoping to flip the House. And I'm here with Delegate Dawn Scott, who is the minority leader of House Democrats here in Virginia. You're hoping that changes, and you are poised to be House Speaker, the first black person to ever hold that title if it happens. What are you seeing tonight, and what are you taking away as we're watching these election results come in?
Thank you. I believe that the voters are sending a message to all of us, Democrats and Republicans, that the number one issue that they care about is freedom. They want bodily autonomy. Women want control of their own bodies. They don't want the government in the middle between them and their doctors. They want to make their own decisions, and people want to have voting choice. People want to make sure that we're taking care of the everyday kitchen table issues. Make sure we're taking care of the economy. Go back to the basics. Make sure that people have a fair shot in this economy. Make sure that we're providing great health care. Make sure we're providing a first-class education to our children, and making sure that we keep our schools safe from gun violence. And I think those are the issues that are resonating with voters today.
And you know, we, national media, we've talked a lot about the abortion issue. Democrats have really leaned heavily into that here in Virginia. Governor Glenn Youngkin has proposed a 15-week ban with the exception for rape, incest, or the life of the mother. He has not emphasized it as much on the campaign trail. When asked about it, he'll talk about it. But you all have really leaned into that message. Why?
Well, we think that women have told us we didn't have a choice, because this is the concerns of the voters have. People want to believe that we're living in a country where women can make their own choices about their own bodies. And that's a basic right. That intimacy around your own body and to be able to make that decision. My mother's 88 years old. I never thought I have a 14-year-old daughter. I never thought that we live in a world after Roe was overturned that my 88-year-old mother would have more rights than my 14-year-old daughter. And that's what's resonated with voters throughout this era. We've not leaned into it. We've listened to voters, and voters have told us that that's what they care about. And so we've come up with policy prescriptions to be able to make sure that we keep Roe the law in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
And this is an off year election, is how you say it. There's not really anyone at the top of the ticket to drive turnout. These are very local races. How do you convince your voters it's worth voting?
Well, Tip O'Neill said it years ago. All politics is local. And what it is once you connect to your local voters, in my community where I live in Portsmouth, and every single local, we have 100 unique seats in the House of Delegates. And every single one of those communities are different. So what may be a top priority in one district may be different. And so it's so important that you connect with each and every community. And if we do that, then voters will come out. In off-year elections like this, it's about a 30 to 40% turnout. In presidential years, 75% of registered voters turn out. So we need to make sure that we're connecting with those voters, getting as many as we can to turn out. And we're getting in some areas where Democrats will take charge, hopefully, because we're getting crazy turnout. We're getting turnout that's mimicking presidential year turnout.
All right, Delegate Dawn Scott, thanks so much for stopping by. We appreciate it. Jake, we'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Jessica. Really appreciate it. I'm back here at the Magic Wall, one of my favorite places to be in the entire world. And we're looking at this map, which has an interestingly placed Hawaii and Alaska, we were just noting.
Yes.
They haven't moved, right? This is wrong?
They have not moved. We often have data here on big, busy election nights. We have 50 states, so they're down there a little bit. Yes, it's...
Okay, because I wanted to make sure, because yes. I am making...
There are our kids in middle school right now are saying that's not how we teach it in geography.
Okay, because I was making Christmas plans and that...
Right.
See, okay.
It's a shorter flight.
I was going to say, but also probably less warm. So, but these fights, especially in Virginia and especially in Kentucky right now, they're being fought in the suburbs. And tell me about what's going on in the suburbs, especially in Kentucky right now.
And so we're going to watch to see if a pattern emerges, right, throughout the night. This is what the Democrats are hoping. Number one, we're up to 74% now. And the governor, the Democratic incumbent, has a 51,000 vote lead. So we're still waiting. You see these gray counties. We're being cautious here. But that is a governor on the path, not there yet, not to the finish line, but he is on the path to re-election in a very tough climate. A Democrat in a red state, in the middle of this economy, in the middle of the president being underwater. This is a very impressive path. We're not to the finish line yet. So let's show you, Andy Beshear, you see all that blue out there. Let me just bring this up here. Let's just look at suburban counties, okay? And this will pull out of the way in just a second. You can see more of it. But you see in the suburban counties here, especially the bigger ones, around Louisville, around Lexington, around Frankfort, the Cincinnati suburbs here, Andy Beshear is winning most of the suburban counties. That's how you win competitive elections in tight states. Democrats tend to run it up in the urban areas. Republicans tend to run it up in the rural areas. And the competitive battlegrounds, you're from one of them, Philadelphia, the collar counties around Philadelphia. That's where close elections are won. Democrats have succeeded in the suburbs in recent years. When I started this, that's how George H.W. Bush became president. He won around Philadelphia. Yep. He won in Ohio. So look at this in Kentucky tonight, right? There's one. The Democrat is winning in the suburbs. One of the things he ran on was abortion. Republicans are harsh on abortion. Stay with me. For Andy Beshear, we're not to the finish line. That message appears to be working. So let's come up here now to a different issue in a very different state. In Ohio, the question is the constitutional right to an abortion. Yep. About a quarter of the vote in. Donald Trump won this state by 8 points. It has a Republican governor, Republican statewide, Republican officials. Yes, on a constitutional right to abortion is getting 60% of the vote right now in a red state. And so this is the entire state. And you see the green is yes. Right? These are more rural areas. But so again, let's bring up the same comparison. Take a look at it. You bring up the suburban counties. That's a lot of green. Right? This is the American suburbs, just like in Kansas. The Kansas City suburbs in Kansas, the Topeka suburbs. That was the first vote after the Dobbs decision. In a very red state, suburban voters in Kansas who vote Republican for president, who vote Republican for a lot of things, said no on this issue. Suburban voters in Ohio who vote Republican on a lot of things, right? Let's just circle some of these counties. Let's do this. That one's Democratic. But watch this. Now you're going to see some blue in here. Let's come up here. You're going to see some blue in here for Joe Biden in 2020, but you're also going to see something else.
Wow.
See all that red?
Lot of red.
These are in counties won by Donald Trump, some of them convincingly. Voters are saying we want a constitutional right to an abortion, right? And so here's the question, right? Here's the question. I mean, I'm not going to your state, not your Commonwealth, not tonight. It is Commonwealth night, though. So as you come back to Ohio and you come back to issue one and you see this in the suburbs, we see it in Kentucky, we see it in Ohio. Does it happen in Virginia? That is the question. If we can slide over here and we just look, we're waiting for these results to come in, right? Here's the current balance of power, right? You have, Republicans up narrowly in the House of Delegates. You have Democrats up narrowly in the state Senate. And so then you come, let's just use the Senate map. This is what we're looking at now. Redrawn districts. This is the state of play. We don't have a live data feed for Virginia because of legislative races. But where are the key races? The key races are up here in the Washington suburbs and down here in the Richmond suburbs. So if the pattern continues, that's what we're looking for. Or has Governor Youngkin, with the 15-week proposal, found a middle ground that stops the momentum of the abortion right forces? It seems to be working in Kentucky tonight. It looks like it's working in Ohio tonight. Here's test number 3, still to be answered.
All right, both parties are watching the numbers come in from Kentucky, from Mississippi, from Ohio, from Virginia as they try to read the message voters are sending. Coming up, we're learning how the Biden campaign is interpreting these numbers so far after this quick break.
Ahead right now, ahead of Daniel Cameron, the current Attorney General, Republican candidate for governor, 46.9. Right now, we have 82% of the vote in Kentucky. So right now, Governor Beshear is maintaining that obviously extremely solid lead that he has right now, 82% of the vote in. And we're getting the Biden campaign's reaction to tonight's results so far. I want to go straight to our senior White House correspondent, MJ Lee. MJ, obviously, these are in several crucial states, very specific races, but ones that could be hugely significant. So how closely is the president watching them? All right. Obviously, I'm sorry. Wasn't sure if it was just me. Sometimes it's just my ear, but obviously we couldn't hear her. When we get MJ back, we'll go to her. But I do want to go to Jeff Zeleny because he's been following the Republican presidential candidates and what they're looking at tonight. So, Jeff, on that front, how are they responding not only to tonight's votes as we are watching this come in, but to the poll that David Chalian's been going through bit by bit here through the night that CNN just came out with, which frankly is a very dismal poll for President Biden?
Well, Aaron, a year before the 2024 election, not all Republicans are celebrating President Biden's low approval rating and those headwinds that are facing him on inflation, on the economy, and more. And here is why. A central part of their argument for the last several months at all the debates, including the one here tomorrow night, has been that Trump can't win, that Trump cannot beat Joe Biden. Well, the poll numbers and just the overall sense of the sour mood of the country now are essentially have erased that argument, or certainly watered down that argument for Republican candidates. So in a nutshell, Aaron, the weakness of President Biden has helped President Trump. I talked to a senior advisor to a Republican candidate tonight and said that Biden's pain has been Trump's gain. And this advisor was not being glib. They said this simply has been a fact of life of this campaign, that Biden's weakness has built up President Trump. So this is something that we'll see tomorrow night at the debate here tomorrow, Aaron.
Right. Thank you. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to get to Jake, because I know, Jake, we've got a key projection in a crucial race tonight.
That's right, Aaron. CNN can now make a projection in a marquee race this evening. CNN is projecting that Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, a Democrat, has been reelected. This is a very significant win for Democrats. Beshear, who ran as a defender of abortion rights in a largely Republican Commonwealth, Kentucky, is defeating Republican Attorney General Daniel Cameron. Again, incumbent Democrat Andy Beshear has won a second term as governor in Ruby Red, Kentucky. Let's go to Eva McKend now, who's in Louisville at Beshear headquarters. Eva McKend, I have to say, not only are we calling it for Beshear, it's not even 9 p.m. yet. Big win for the incumbent Democratic governor in Red, Kentucky.
Yes, Jake, it is a significant victory for Governor Beshear. And, you know, as I've been speaking to Democrats, they were hopeful, but they did not think that it would be called this early. They say that it's really a testament to the strategy that the governor employed. He's well known, well liked in this state, but he often emphasized an inclusive strategy of reaching out in the final weeks of this campaign to voters that are often described as forgotten voters. And he was at the helm during several natural disasters in this state, as well as the pandemic. I spoke to a woman today, and she told me, you know, during the pandemic, he took care of us. By the results tonight, it seems as though voters in Kentucky have rewarded him for it, Jake.
Indeed. Eva McKend in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you so much. And let's talk about this. Is this, it's already, I'm already going to go right there. Is this a template for Democrats nationwide? Is the Beshear template? Is there Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania? Is there something here for others to follow in terms of reaching across the aisle, reaching out to working class Democrats, working class individuals, and on and on and on?
Maybe the lesson here is run your own race. I mean, I think when you talk to Democrats who are running on issues and in campaigns across the country, every single one of these races is different in a certain way, and each one of these candidates has to be, as both parties will say, the right fit for their state, their district, their geography, and also navigate these issues. I think that's what Andy Beshear did very well. He identified abortion as an issue that he was being attacked on, but that he could also go on offense on. He had some significant issues in his state in terms of a mass shooting that he performed, I think, very well in terms of dealing with it on a national platform. And those things helped him. He's also well-liked. He happens to also have a very well-known family. All of those things help him. Playing those things to your advantage help. But you didn't see him here hugging Joe Biden, hugging national Democrats, even hugging just a national narrative in his state. I don't think you're going to see a lot of that, frankly, from either party in this coming cycle, because what the polls really show us is that both parties at a national level are particularly toxic to voters in this country.
Yes, I don't know that this is transferable, in off-year elections or off-year elections, as this is. You sort of look for the tea leaves and what it means for the next election, and we are looking at a lot of questions, and I don't know how many answers we got. In this particular case, he is such a unique character. Not only does he have the name ID, but he's well liked, which is not nothing in these times when people just don't like politicians. I mean, I don't know that they ever really have loved politicians, but even more so right now, and really the authenticity factor.
And Abby's right. He over that mass shooting happened. It killed a friend of his. He actually had to tell his friend's wife that his friend had been killed in that. He also oversaw flooding and the response there in the state that I think earned him goodwill with voters there. One interesting part was how he chose to lean in on the abortion messaging. That was a national message that he took there. He painted Daniel Cameron as this extremist, and that even though, you know, staying and being reelected, he's not really going to have the power to change those laws because he still does have a very Republican legislature that he's dealing with. But it is interesting seeing the different through lines and what could be potentially helpful with Democrats still leaning in on abortion on that message, even in a really red state.
I mean, over and over again, my sources say, yeah, okay, Biden's got problems, people aren't feeling great, but they really don't like the extremism of the Republican Party. And at the end of the day, that's going to carry Biden in 2024. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think, you know, Dana, you're right to point out all the reasons why this is not an exact template for a presidential race, of course. But I do think there's a lot here for Democrats to learn from.
And if you look at the opposite, let's say Beshear lost, then it would be, oh my gosh, it's a big, big warning sign for Joe Biden. I mean, of course, that's what the way it would have been played.
Right.
So that is, it's certainly better for Joe Biden and better for Democrats when you look ahead to next year that Andy Beshear won. But I do think that the key here is what it should tell politicians, what it should tell America about how to actually be an effective politician. And the answer is to be an effective leader.
But can we also talk about the extremism bit that you just mentioned,
Yeah.
Casey? I mean, Daniel Cameron was supposed to be the kind of friendly face on a MAGA-friendly Republican. So he wasn't like a hard-charging flamethrower, but he was. He said a lot of positive things about Donald Trump. He didn't alienate himself from that. He was endorsed by Trump. He didn't alienate himself from the far right, but he did it in a way that made him seem likable. He was potentially a new face for the Republican Party, a black man in a red state, trying to broaden at least the appearance of the party. That didn't work. I mean, look, there are a multitude of factors here, but I think we should point out it did not work in this case to put a friendlier face on a MAGA Republican.
Well,
there's something to be said for that.
You said that Governor Beshear painted Daniel Cameron as an extremist on abortion, but I think his position was rather extreme, though, right? I mean, his position was he was...
Right, he just highlighted it.
Yeah, he was anti-abortion, period, right? I mean, like, he just had a very anti-abortion position.
He had to come out actually, and because of that Beshear ad of the 12-year-old girl who said she was raped by her stepfather, Daniel Cameron had to come out and say he did favor exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother.
So the other question I have is, we talked about how, and we'll see what the results are of the Ohio referendum, but since Roe v. Wade was overturned, since the Dobbs decision, there have been 6 states that have weighed in on abortion, and Kansas, Montana, and Kentucky are among them. So I'm not exactly sure what the Kentucky ruling was, but the Kentucky has already weighed in on this issue on the abortion rights side, I believe. So the idea that this issue is going to continue to haunt Republicans, including in red states, and maybe it wouldn't, for example, haunt Republicans in Alabama, for example, but in states that have trended blue in the last 20 years, it seems as though Governor Beshear really played that to his advantage in a major way, because if you look at the maps that John was showing us a little while ago, he really dominated in the suburbs in places that Donald Trump won in 2020.
One thing about the abortion dynamics that we've been seeing is that key distinction, it's when abortion is put to voters, they tend to vote in support of abortion rights broadly. But when you see abortion being banned, as it is in much of the South, it is usually when existing Republican legislators and governors move to ban it, not putting it to the voters, but they themselves, feeling empowered by whoever put them in office, move to ban it. And so that's why I think an argument against a governor on this issue of abortion, even when it's not on the ballot, can be very potent. Because I think voters understand the role that governors have and legislators have in basically passing abortion restrictions without the voters actively having a say so.
Which is going to be put to the test in Virginia.
And they are pushing back on that in some cases.
Yeah. So, Jake, to answer your question, forgive me for using Google to answer your question. Yes, Kentucky voters rejected a ballot measure that would have denied constitutional protection for abortion. So it was a victory for abortion rights supporters. But the bottom line is that Kentucky has one of the most draconian bans in the country. There was a trigger law passed in 2019 that went into effect when Dobbs was overturned. So voters there are feeling the effects of what a ban like this does. But, to go back to something you were saying, Abby, about, I was thinking about, yes, David Cameron obviously has a different profile from Glenn Youngkin in certain important ways. But we've been saying the same things about them, right? Yeah. Kinder, gentler Republican.
I actually think they have a very similar profile in some ways, except that maybe Cameron is a little bit more openly embracing of the Trumpism.
Right. But the bottom line here is we're still waiting on the results in Virginia, but I will say all the Democrats I'm talking to are very optimistic. And it really looks like that is just not a package that is selling right now.
So let's throw to John King to find out where we are on this Ohio referendum dealing with abortion rights. John?
Jake, about 37% of the estimated vote in, so a ways to go in the count. But, and this is a very important but, yes, the Ohio Constitution should have the right to an abortion in the state Constitution. Is getting 58% of the vote if you add that up right now, and it's 229,000 votes plus is the margin. And if you look at the map, the green is yes on abortion rights in the state Constitution. And if you take a look at that, in Cleveland, in Columbus, in Cincinnati, it's winning in the urban areas. And guess what? It's winning in all the suburban areas around Youngstown, Akron, Cleveland, Toledo, Cincinnati. This is a romp, if you will. Donald Trump won this state by 8 points, right? It has a Republican governor who is anti-abortion. The voters of Ohio, it's not done yet. We're still counting votes, and we have not projected this one yet. But just like in the Kentucky race, it gets overwhelming at some point. You're just trying to be extra cautious and count the rest of the votes as they come in. So let's just see where we are. You go up here, Lucas County. This is where Toledo is, 6th largest county in the state. Only 26% of the vote in. So you watch it, you see if the trend shifts. 74% right now. So one argument could be these are early votes, mail-in votes, so you wait to see if other votes come in. That's what we do, but it's pretty overwhelming. Then you come over here to Cleveland, Cuyahoga, Jake, and 78%. So the math is the math.
All right, John, we have a major projection to share with you right now. CNN projects that voters in Republican-leaning Ohio have approved the ballot measure to establish a state constitutional right to an abortion. Ohio becoming the 7th state in the nation where voters have backed abortion rights since Roe v. Wade was overturned last year. The Ohio vote is likely to reinforce Democrats' plans to make abortion rights central to their message in 2024. Again, CNN projecting the abortion rights ballot measure in red Ohio will be approved. And that is a celebration you're looking at right now of abortion rights supporters in Columbus, Ohio, celebrating their victory this evening, adding to the state constitution the abortion rights now enshrined in their state constitution. Aaron Burnett?
All right, Jake and Kate Bedingfield, I mean, that's the celebration that you're focused on. That's the train that you say Biden needs to get on. There you go.
Yes.
You've had a tough night, so go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, look, there's discussion now. It's funny. I think Dana was saying, I think it was Dana who was saying, if Beshear had lost, it would be like Biden was a drag, and now because he's won, it's like, well, did Joe Biden really help? I don't know. But look, Daniel Cameron spent $30 million in paid advertising in this race, and most of it was hitting Joe Biden, trying to tie Biden to Beshear. So Republicans made a really full-throated effort to try to make this race about Joe Biden. It did not drag Andy Beshear down. And so the other thing I would say, I noticed a CNN reporter tweeting that the Kentucky governor's race has predicted the presidential cycle for the last 5 cycles.
Yes.
So if we're going to talk,
calm down, Axelrod.
If we're going to spend tonight talking about a year from now, then let's look at this.
I think that's true, and I think what you're seeing around the country seems to be consistent with what we've seen all year. In race after race, which is Democratic turnout is high. Now, the polls suggest that Republican enthusiasm is greater than Democratic enthusiasm. But in the real world tests, at least in this year and in 2022, that hasn't been the case. And the question is, does that carry forward into 2024? And how do the complicated feelings about the presidential candidates enter into it? But this is a better night.
Before we get too up in the atmosphere, I just want to say, ordinarily, I would be very sad if a black guy ran for governor and lost. But I'm not sad today because of Breonna Taylor. Was the reason that you saw no movement of African Americans toward him, not just because he's a Republican, but because he had a chance to put in jail the police officers who murdered Breonna Taylor. Prosecutors said there was plenty of evidence to do so, and he chose not to. And so, for some people, they were voting for for Beshear. Some people were voting about Breonna Taylor.
Also, I want to throw out there that Beshear, you know, it's a little bit of a vote for competence in terms of, like, right, the voters were happy with how he dealt with the floods, how he dealt with COVID, and McConnell, Mitch McConnell, and the president all stood side by side with Beshear about infrastructure spending. So it's not as though he was this, like, liberal Democrat from out of state, something.
Making people eat kale.
Yeah, he's the scion of a political dynasty.
He's also a really talented presence on television, and you know, you see him in these very moving situations, tragedies in which he shows great empathy. And I will tell you that without question, he will be now leaping into the discussion about 2028 and the presidential race.
But to this point, okay, so you look at what's happening tonight. Huge victory in Ohio for abortion rights. Democratic, very significant victory in Kentucky in a red state. You talk about the enthusiasm. You're not seeing the competitive race going on. So there's all that strength, that energy, that enthusiasm, and then you got a poll that's abysmal for Biden, right? So what's the gap there?
Well, that's what we're going to find out. But,
can I jump in here? I mean, the details do matter. And when it comes to the Ohio ballot measure, it specifically talked about not just abortion, but about your contraceptive rights, but about miscarriage, also about not being penalized if you
But in a world where these things are happening, it is a little jarring.
But I'm
to see
saying
the
it's
incumbent
not.
Democratic
It's not a
president doing
yes,
so
no,
poorly.
abortion, yes, no. That's not how it's actually playing out, vote to vote, state to state. In Kentucky, the ads about abortion didn't actually mention abortion. So I think the lessons we want to take away is, how did people talk about these things? How did they frame it for the voters? And is that something you can bring forward for the next couple of months?
And I'd just say also, if you look at the polls, I've not been able to drill down in this, but there's a gap between where Biden is and down ballot Democrats, right? So Biden, terrible numbers. In Pennsylvania, for example, and the New York Times and the polling that I've seen, you know, Biden does terribly. Bob Casey's kind of holding his own, right? In most of these states, the down ballot candidates, Democrats, are still okay. There's a drag from.
But there's a
disconnect.
Opposite of the Trump factor here. So while Trump had a really good night in terms of his polling that we put out, his candidates are not doing well.
Well, he didn't have a good night in the polling. He really didn't.
Well, he did better than
unpopular
to say he did better
Biden.
than Biden. But just note that Daniel Cameron's closing message was, "I'm backed by Donald Trump," and he lost. I would note the Kentucky Secretary of State won re-election, Michael Adams, a Republican who had beat election deniers to become Secretary of State and won by 61%, outperforming Daniel Cameron. Wow. So again, election deniers go down, and Trump is a drag on the ticket.
Right, and it is interesting when you get to the top and you get to these polls, what does that actually really mean, right? Because when you get, rubber meets the road, you're seeing something a bit different. All right, well, contests in Ohio and Kentucky are now decided. We have made those calls, and we are now waiting to see another crucial race. That is the Mississippi governor's race and how that will play out. A lot of votes still outstanding there. Too early to call it. And we expect to hear from the Kentucky governor, Andy Beshear, at any moment, now that he is projected to win re-election. We'll be right back.
Stand by for that, but right now let's go to Caitlin Collins. Caitlin?
Yeah, I want to talk about the stakes of tonight's race and the 2024 election with Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, also from Ohio. We just made a key race alert there. Obviously, Vivek, voters there voting yes on issue 1 to enshrine the right to an abortion in the state's constitution. Do you think that's a warning sign for Republicans?
Look, I voted no on that earlier today before flying down here to Miami, but my view is on the merits, our pro-life movement, and I am part of it, needs to be better about the way we discuss this issue. Actually talk about greater access to adoption, to child care, further, even go further to sexual responsibility for men. I think that too few of us are talking about these issues that can say we're not in this, it's not about a men's rights versus women's rights issue, it's a human rights issue. The fact of the matter is, Clarence Thomas brought up an example in the Dobbs case of a pregnant woman who was assaulted and asks the question of who in this country would say that that criminal doesn't deserve liability for that death. I haven't met one yet, Caitlin. And so I think we're more united on the pro-life instincts than the pro-life movement has actually been good at representing so far. But we need to talk about the issue very differently in order to bring people along here. I will say that it was also outspent in Ohio by many multiples, the yes versus no. And so the influence of money in politics, I think, showed up in this result as well.
Well, a lot of money was spent on the other side. But do you really think it's a messaging issue and not just that voters clearly believe that they should have the rights that they had before Roe versus Wade was overturned?
Well, I think some of this is substance. It's not just messaging. Actually walking the walk when it comes to being pro-life on access to contraception, to adoption, to even child care. And as I said, a missing lever that we really ought to embrace on the right is greater sexual responsibility for men codified in the law in an era of genetic paternity tests, put more of a burden financially and otherwise on the father when it's a confirmed paternity test. I think those are winning paths forward for us. That combined with different messaging, yes, I do believe will win many Americans over. If you look at a state like Iowa, not that different in many respects than Ohio. I mean, they're very different states, but when you look at a red versus blue divide, Iowa went for a 6-week ban with growing majorities for the legislators who supported it. So I do think the framing and the messaging and the context actually does matter. I don't think this should be a sign that the Republican Party should abandon a pro-life position.
Iowa is Iowa, home to a lot of evangelicals. I mean, Ohio is a deeply red state. You don't think this is a sign that your party's on the wrong side of the abortion issue?
I think it is a sign that the Republican Party needs to graduate in how not only we talk about this issue, but putting substance into what it means to be pro-life. And I, for my part, am doing that. I think I'm the only candidate talking about codifying in the law greater sexual responsibility for men. But I think the less we make this about men's rights versus women's rights, but really in substance, say we're all in this together. I think so. I think so, absolutely. It's going to be up to the voters to decide. It should be driven by the states, and so it's up to the people to speak up at the state level. But I do think that if we frame this issue correctly, this need not be some sort of final sign that we take. This was a lost battle in Ohio today. I'm disappointed about that. I think there are deep reflections in the Republican Party and in the pro-life movement about how to improve from here. But abandoning the pro-life cause, I don't think is the right answer. I think the right answer is opening up other ways where we can walk the walk in terms of being pro-life, from adoption to contraception to sexual responsibility for men codified in the law.
So,
and I favor all of those things.
Just to be clear, you think the issue is how Republicans are talking about abortion, or talking about contraception and adoption, not the actual issue of being against abortion access?
Not just talking about it, as I mentioned, Caitlin, but I think being willing to stand for substantive provisions in the law that codify greater responsibility for men in cases of confirmed paternity tests, and also greater access to options like contraception, adoption, and otherwise. So I think that substantive difference can make a difference. It's not just a verbal question. But yes, I do think that that will change the outcomes versus what we're seeing tonight.
Yeah, well, clearly voters in Ohio disagreed, since they just voted to pass this that they did vote to pass this. Indeed, it now is part of the state's constitution. You talked about how this is a state's issue. Obviously, you're running to be the Republican candidate for president. If you were president, would you sign a federal abortion ban into law if it was on your desk?
I've been crystal clear about this. I would not. And the reason why is I'm a 10th Amendment absolutist. I practice what I preach in my commitment to the Constitution. This should not be a federal issue. So here's what I do from a federal perspective. Stop federal funding for Planned Parenthood. I think the federal government has no place in tilting the scales using money. But I do not think it is the place of the federal government to get involved in either codifying Roe versus Wade into law. But unlike many other Republican candidates, I stand on the side of principle because that's a constitutional limit. Roe versus Wade was correctly overturned, but we have to practice what we preach when it comes to the Constitution. This is an issue for the states. And I say this as somebody who's disappointed by the outcome in Ohio today. But for me, it is about principle over politics when it comes to my commitment to the Constitution. I also think that if we federalize this issue as Republicans, when the shoe fits the other foot and Democrats are in charge, it will not go well for the pro-life cause at the federal level either. More babies, unborn babies, will die over the next 30 years, I believe, if this issue is federalized.
I will
So I
say,
stand by that.
Mr. Ramaswamy, that Donald Trump predicted, put those Supreme Court justices in place that overturned Roe versus Wade, that this is hurting Republicans at the ballot box. But we have other news about another race in your home state. I want you to stand by for just a moment. We're going to get that update, and then we'll come back to you in just a moment.
We have a new projection for you from Ohio. CNN is projecting that Ohioans have approved a ballot measure to legalize recreational marijuana use for adults. Ohio becomes the 24th state in the nation to make recreational pot use legal. Again, CNN projects the Ohio ballot initiative on marijuana has been approved.
Well,
Caitlin?
Mr. Ramaswamy, we were just talking about how you voted on issue 1, the abortion rights issue. How did you vote on the marijuana issue this morning?
I voted no on that one specifically for two reasons. One is I think it's an abandonment of the rule of law when you have one set of rules at the federal level, but state laws that contradict federal law. I don't think that helps our commitment to the rule of law. I think it creates a lot of confusion in this country. And also the tax proceeds here were directed towards purposes that I think have no place, equity programs or otherwise, that are completely irrelevant to the measure at issue. So having studied it, I came down on the side of no, but I did hear the update that you just provided. And, at the end of the day, we live in a constitutional republic. That means we live by what the people vote for according to the rules of that constitutional republic. And so, that is what it is. And I understand that, but I disagree with the outcome that was reached.
Do you feel out of touch with your other Ohioans, and given the fact that you voted no on the abortion rights issue and you voted no on the marijuana issue, and both have passed?
I mean, we're talking about 40+% in each case. So I think to call that out of touch with Ohioans, I think is out of touch, Caitlin, with all due respect. We do have issues we need to sort out in this country. Yeah, I don't think you're asking my thoughts. You were asking me if I feel out of touch because I sided with 45% of people rather than 55% of people, or wherever the numbers end up shaking out. The reality is I think we have legitimate substantive debates we ought to have in this country. My view is let's have them respectfully in the open where every citizen's voice and vote counts equally. And you know what? That's the way a constitutional republic works. Our side, I think, needs to do a better job of not only how we message, but how we stand for the substance of our principles. I think there's a reasonable conversation to be had about at the federal level about how we evolve our drug laws. But I think the disconnect between state level laws that are drastically different than the federal laws create confusion and create, I would say, an abandonment of the culture of the rule of law in this country. And that's why I voted no.
Yeah, Vivek Ramaswamy, great to have you with us on that Ohio news, given you are an Ohio voter. Thank you so much. We'll see you in Miami tomorrow night. Obviously, he said he voted yes, or voted no on the abortion rights issue. To hear him talk about how he believes the issue is how Republicans are talking about male responsibility for pregnancies, adoption, he thinks that's the issue, not necessarily the stance that abortion access should be limited.
We just talk about the fact that the same people, the same body politic that voted to send Mike DeWine and J.D. Vance to the Senate voted to legalize abortion and recreational marijuana use this evening.
Yeah, what is going on?
What's going on in Ohio? This is before they legalized marijuana usage.
Look, Caitlin, to your point about you always go to the messaging problem when you have a policy problem. I think that's kind of what you're seeing here with Ramaswamy. It's not, I don't think, that voters don't understand what banning abortion or not banning abortion means. This has been a dominant issue in American politics for 50 years. And so right now, voters are just getting a chance to vote on it. They haven't really had that opportunity in a long time. And when they are voting on it, they are deciding, it's really a question, I think, for voters of what do I want my government to do and what do I want to be able to do myself. Now, even if you don't yourself you don't agree with abortion, you would never have one, you don't think people should have one. When you ask the people the question, what should my government do? we are finding that they are saying, I don't want my government to be a part of those decisions.
Do you think it's a libertarian argument?
I don't think it's libertarian in a political sense. I think it is just simply that, I mean, I've talked to voters about this, and they just simply say, that's not what I would do, but I just don't think that the government should be in charge of that.
Well, except for on abortion, well, there are a lot of Republicans who consider themselves libertarian, except abortion, because they consider that in its own category. But what I do think is really fascinating, and listening to Vivek Ramaswamy, is how many knots Republicans are sort of putting themselves in to figure out a way to talk about anything other than what you were pressing him on, which is the fundamental rights that many, many women think that they had, rightly so, and that were taken away with the Dobbs decision. And the fact that he was talking about it through the prism of men and what men could do, I'm not really sure how that's going to.
I mean, can we just call a spade with Vivek? I mean,
I'm sorry, I do need to interrupt because one of the big winners of the evening, Kentucky incumbent Governor Beshear, is about to speak. Let's go to that live in Louisville.
Thank you, Kentucky! Tonight, Kentucky made a choice. A choice not to move to the right or to the left, but to move forward for every single family. A choice to reject Team R or Team D and to state clearly that we are one Team Kentucky. A choice of Jack Harlow over Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And tonight, the people of Kentucky elected me as just the third two-consecutive-term governor in our history. But folks, this wasn't my win. This was our victory. It was a victory that sends a loud, clear message. A message that candidates should run for something and not against someone. That a candidate should show vision and not sow division. And a clear statement that anger politics should end right here and right now. Just look at what we were up against. 5 super PACs. My opponent's super PAC, Mitch McConnell's super PAC, Rand Paul's super PAC, the Club for Growth, the Republican Governors Association, all running ads full of hate and division. And you know what? We beat them all at the same time. This election shows who we are as Kentuckians. We are a proud people who take care of each other. We believe in the golden rule that says we love our neighbor as ourselves, and the parable of the Good Samaritan that says we are all each other's neighbors, no exceptions. Our neighbors aren't just Democrats. They're not just Republicans. They're not just independents. Every single person is a child of God, and they are all our neighbor. We get through the hard times, and we get through them together. We get to the good times, and we get to them together. And wow, are we getting to them. Kentucky is on a historic win streak. The 2 best years of economic development in the history of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We're building the Brent Spence Companion Bridge without tolls. We're 4-laning the entire Mountain Parkway. And we're pushing I-69 forward so fast that Indiana's scrambling to catch up. We're bringing clean drinking water to our counties, and we are running high-speed internet access to every home in Kentucky. We're building the 2 biggest battery plants on planet Earth. And the cleanest, greenest recycled paper mill in this country. We have record high budget surpluses and record low unemployment. We've created almost 50,000 new jobs, $27.8 billion in new private sector investments. So tonight, I stand here excited and optimistic about what we're going to do these next 4 years together. Over these next 4 years, it's time for a couple things. First, it's time to get our educators the big pay raise they deserve. It's time for universal pre-K for every Kentucky child. We're going to keep attracting new jobs and new industries, building our workforce, building the Kentucky we have always dreamed of. And it's amazing that we're here because we have been through a lot together. Devastating tornadoes in the west, historic flooding in the east. And after each, I made a promise that I would help rebuild every home and every life. And thanks to the people of Kentucky, and thanks to this election, we're going to see that promise through. I pledge tonight to continue to be a governor who serves all our people, regardless of your party and regardless of who you voted for. These next 4 years, we have an opportunity to come further together. This is our chance to build that Commonwealth we have always dreamed of, to stop the fighting, to push away the division, to recognize that we have more that unites us that can ever pull us apart, and that the opportunity right in front of us is more promising than at any time in our lifetimes. I have a lot of thank yous. First, to my parents. To Steve and Jane Beshear, thank you for all your support, your service, and your leadership. I love you. To my wife, Brittany. And to my kids, Will and Lila. You are the reason I do this, but you're the reason I do everything. I love you all so much. Hadley is here tonight. She is a brave young woman who came forward to share her story, to speak for so many that couldn't speak for themselves. And because of her courage, this Commonwealth is going to be a better place, and people are going to reach out for the help they need. Thank you, Hadley. Thanks to my close friends here tonight, and I just want to take a minute to recognize that we've lost some incredible people recently who stood on a similar stage with us just 4 years ago. I know they're smiling down. I know they're so pleased at where we're going. And I know they know that we love them and that we will see them again. I want to say thank you to every volunteer and field organizer that did the hard work of knocking doors.
Our now re-elected governor of Kentucky, according to our projection, giving his acceptance
See, it's that
speech.
type of energy that helped us
Interesting,
win.
David, that someone, as we were listening here, there was commentary saying this was an acceptance speech that turned into sort of an announcement. I mean, it did sound very big.
My campaign
Yeah,
manager,
this seems
Eric
like
Hires,
this seems like
who
something
ran
you
a
want to take on the road.
perfect race.
And I don't mean just the roads of Kentucky, which he mentioned at some length there, but around the country. And there's no doubt he's going to be a person that people are interested in. We've all seen him, as I said earlier, at these tragic moments. But the whole idea, I think, if you think about what the country will be looking for down the road, it's going to be someone who can bring people together. It's going to be youth. It's going to be energy, and it's going to be projecting a vision of the future.
And we haven't had a guy like that since Bill Clinton. It's a good Southern governor that's able to reach across the party divide, the racial divide. So I think tonight's an important night for the country. There's help on the way, not for 2024, maybe 2028.
David, he's 45. He'll be 46 on November 29th. He obviously, it's a red state. He wins. One of his key lines there, to the point that David was making about all the roads that he's talking about in the future, not left, not right, but forward.
And toll-free, by the way. Just,
right, what you said, toll-free.
Toll-free.
The local part of the politics
people of
is the
Kentucky are
toll-free.
very grateful about it.
I don't know. He outspent Cameron by 18 million, so it wasn't exactly told.
But listen, look, he's obviously he comes from a political dynasty in Kentucky. He's obviously a gifted political athlete. We're going to see him around. He gave a great speech. He's a personable guy. He's out there.
Good family.
You're going to see him again.
There's also pent-up demand for leadership. I mean, one thing about being in a gerontocracy is that if everyone at the top of all of these tickets is elderly, then there's a whole generation of people who aren't necessarily getting their shot. I mean, listen to us all talking about 2028. So I think that there's going to be a hunger for voters as they see speeches like his or any other in the next couple of years to say, gosh, who's next?
Well, at the least what you see in the polls is such incredible dissatisfaction, right, with the choices that voters have, right? So that there'd be a hunger to hear anything new.
Well, I was going to say, before we coronate him the future Democratic leader for 2028, he ran as a consummate moderate. He actually intentionally addressed the abortion issue without using the word abortion, did not make it a focal point. He focused on effective results for the state of Kentucky. He talked about the bipartisan infrastructure results he delivered, how he responded to floods. So I think that he actually ran, borderline right of center on particular issues. This is somebody with tremendous talent. There's a future there, but this is also not where the National Democratic Party
I think if Scott Jennings were here and not in Kentucky with his friend Daniel Cameron, he would disagree with you a little, because whenever I've had a discussion with him, he'd say and not for the cameras, he'd say he's really a liberal in disguise. So I think that, I'm not sure, and no one's coronating him. Listen, the first person first tweet I saw congratulating him came from J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, who's been investing in campaigns all around the country. There are lots of young Democrats,
and the other thing, too,
Democratic leaders who are waiting to emerge.
The other thing too is I think we spend a lot more time on people's position as opposed to personality. I mean, people are looking for stuff. Like half this stuff we talk about, regular folks can't follow at all. But if somebody is a leader and somebody can bring people together, I think they get a shot.
Yeah. And I think that also we talked a little bit about reaching across the aisle. And, I would disagree a little bit, Alyssa, in that I think there are actually a lot of Democrats in our party who do want to reach across the aisle, who are met with a lot of opposition by Republicans. And I think one of the things that gets lost sometimes, particularly in primaries, when people are, when the sort of most, the most extreme voices are the most vocal, is that actually the majority of Americans want to see their leaders reach across the aisle, and they want to see them work together. And that frequently gets lost. But it is actually, at the end of the day, it is something that motivates people to turn out and vote. Obviously, Governor Beshear is somebody who can do that, but I think there are other Democrats who can do that.
Is there anything Biden can learn from this?
Well, look, I think this is actually a very Biden-esque campaign. Biden also talks a lot about reaching across the aisle. In fact, during the 2019 primary, he was pilloried for talking about being able to reach across the aisle. And he was told that's not what Democratic voters want to hear.
But
and that's actually been the core of his message. And he's been able to get things done.
Because if you look at the candidates who've been nominated by the Democratic Party over the last many cycles, it isn't generally the most liberal candidate. It's generally more center-left candidates who have the ability to work across.
And then they get in, and then they govern center-left once they get in.
No, I'm saying they're center-left.
Okay.
It looks like center-left policies are doing pretty well.
We got plenty of time left.
Bipartisan infrastructure
and the Democrats, of course, are celebrating in Kentucky a significant win there for Governor Beshear. Jake?
All right, the big question, of course, but do they have a shot in Mississippi? We're waiting for more votes to drop in the governor's race there. And, of course, can Democrats beat back this Republican push for full control of the Virginia legislature? Critical results coming up. Stay with us. .6% of the vote. He's ahead of his Democratic challenger, Brandon Presley, who has 41.9% of the vote. It's about 1/3 of the vote is in, 34% of the vote is in. And let us go to look at the votes with our friend John King. I know it's only about 1/3 of the vote in. Still, this is not the results that Democrats were hoping for. So when it comes to Brandon Presley, should he anticipate that he's going to have a blue Christmas? I'm very proud of myself. This is the only one I've told all night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So look, let's just wait till we get Hydes County. This is the biggest county in the state by population. It's about 8% of the state population. Remember when Diane Gallagher was there earlier, the Democrats went to court, got a judge to extend the voting a little bit. So we have no votes from Hydes County yet. And so mathematically, you look at this, only about 1/3 of the vote in. That's a big lead. That's a big lead. Let's be honest about it. 57-42. That's a big lead in a red state. The Republican governor has pulled out to a big early lead. We do have a lot of gray. That means counties where we have no votes at all. So you just want to be cautious and wait. Again, especially this is the big one, and it's a Democratic stronghold. But you'd have to see something quite overwhelming there. But you still count them, and we see how we go. You look around elsewhere. You come down. I'm just looking in the blue counties to see. What you do is at this point of the night, you're looking. So what's blue, right? The Democrats behind. So what's blue? 80% of the vote in. It's a pretty small county population.
Teeny county.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of math to make up here, right? So you come in, you look at some of these other blue counties. Let's just move up here. Only 4% of the vote in, but again, 15 of 82. So it's in the top half, top third when it comes to population, but still relatively small. So my theory on these things is, it looks like Governor Reeves is out to an early lead. However, with the largest county still out and a Democratic stronghold still out, where we saw from our own reporter on the scene, long lines. Let's let them count votes. And let's see, does Hydes County, when this comes in, does it substantially change those percentages? If it does, then you keep counting. If it doesn't, then the math's not enough.
So just on the basic math of it, how does Brandon Presley have to do in these big Democratic counties in order to make this competitive? Like 90% of the vote? Like, what does he have to do?
This is like a Biden in a Philadelphia. You need around 80% of the vote, somewhere like that. And that even might not be enough in a state that has not voted Democrat for governor in 20-plus years. I'm not trying to tell people at home, stay up. The Democrat might win here. The Democrat is, not likely to win in Mississippi. However, this has been a competitive race into it, and this is the largest county in the state and a Democratic stronghold that even, let's just go back to the presidential race. You see all this red. Go back to the presidential race. You know, Joe Biden did not have a good night in Mississippi. He got 41% of the vote. But you see, from Jackson and up the western part of the state, there are a lot of Democratic counties here along the river and the like. So, you know, can it happen? Yeah, so let's come back, right? So remember, this is the blue part of the state. Now we come back here, look at the governor's race, and that's what's not filled in, right? So
that's the Democratic part of the
this
state.
is the stretch Joe Biden won. Now, these are not giant population centers, right? 0.9% of the population. 1.5% of the population. 0.1% of the population. So there's not a ton of votes out there, but this is the flip side of what we always say about Donald Trump. It is Donald Trump in most states that runs it up in the rural areas to offset what happens to the Democrats. So let's give Mr. Presley a chance. Let's watch as these votes come in and see if you have A, are you winning by lopsided percentages in all these counties? And B, is turnout high? Have you generated Democratic turnout in a way that might change the math?
What are the population centers other than Jackson where Brandon Presley has to run up the vote?
Well, that's the hard part in the sense that this is the #1 county in the state and we have nothing, right? So we're going to move around a little bit. That's number one. So now you're moving around, you're looking at other places. So you come down here, to Biloxi, Jackson County, fifth, it's the 5th largest, 20% of the vote in. He's running ahead, 10 points. That's decent math. Is it enough? That's the question, right?
How did Biden do in Jackson County?
So you come back here and you come to the thing, boom, 31%. So he's overperforming Biden down here. Overperforming Biden. The question is it enough, right? Because it was so lopsided. It was so lopsided for Trump here. But there's one, and then you come up here. I just want to come up here, and you're south of Tupelo. These are just such small counties. So that's 2% of the 2% of the population, 36% in. Again, so you're looking at 2,000 votes there, 2,400 votes there. The question is, can you double that or a little bit more as you go? When you're looking at 58,000, but if you can get 2,000 here, a couple hundred here, it's possible. And we'll know. It's much easier to do the small math when you get the big math, and we have nothing here right now. So that will tell us, how late you're up and how closely you're counting small places.
So far, Mr. Presley is outperforming Biden from what we can tell early on with only 38%. But you really have to outperform Biden in a state like Mississippi.
Right. Remember, outperforming Biden means you're outperforming 41%.
Right.
So if you need 50%, you have to dramatically outperform Biden. That's the issue. But, again, I'm a big believer in counting. And when you have the biggest Democratic area still out, and Joe Biden won that part of the state, then there's every reason to just wait and see. We're up to 40% of the vote. It's a 58,000 vote lead. Just want to peek around a couple other places just to see where you see blue. Only 9% of the vote in, but again, it's tiny, less than 1% of the population. But you're winning 67 to 33. So there is something. Mr. Presley, Jake, clearly has appeal in these rural areas. He clearly has sold his message. The question is, Trump brought people out of the woodwork to vote. Can Presley do that? Looks bleak at the moment, but we got a lot of votes still to count. So we watch.
All right, John, thanks so much. And we have a projection now in a big city mayor's race that we're watching. In the great city of Philadelphia, CNN projects that Democrat Sherelle Parker will become the very first woman to win the mayor's office in that heavily Democratic city. The former city council mayor will defeat Republican David O. Congratulations to Mayor Sherelle Parker in the great city of Philadelphia. Another key race that we're watching, the battle for control of both chambers of the Virginia state legislature. Democrats have an advantage right now, but will that hold? Our election coverage will continue after this. Ballot measure passed in Ruby Red, Ohio, still undecided as of now. The Mississippi governor's race. And of course, well, here's where we are on that with 43% of the vote in. Incumbent Republican Governor Tate Reeves is ahead by 55,383 votes. He's up at 56% of the vote. Democrat Brandon Presley, a second cousin of Elvis Presley, has 42.5% of the vote. When it comes to the battle for the Virginia legislature, let's take a look at the Virginia House of Delegates. Democrats are currently leading in 53 of those races. Republicans are leading in 47. That would be, if it holds, a pickup for Democrats of the control of the House of Delegates. In the Virginia State Senate, which is currently controlled by Democrats, Democrats are leading in 22 races. Republicans are leading in 18. This has not been decided. This is just where they are leading. But right now, as of now, on these numbers, looks like a good night for Democrats. Over at CNN's, let's go to MJ Lee now. And MJ, the president spoke to the Kentucky governor, Andy Beshear, this evening.
That's right, Jake. And here at the White House, there is already a mood of celebration. The president has been watching election results come in tonight from the White House residence with a couple of his close advisors. And he just sent out this tweet. He said, across the country tonight, democracy won and MAGA lost. Voters vote, polls don't. Now let's go win next year. Of course, there is a donation pitch there as well. Look, there are two things that the campaign and the White House are both saying that they feel vindicated about. First thing is when they look back on this Kentucky race, they say there is a model for Democrats to successfully run on the Biden record. They say that they've seen the governor run on the bipartisan infrastructure law. And you saw in his speech, the governor's speech tonight, he mentioned the Brent Spence Bridge. This is famously the bridge that brought together President Biden, Mitch McConnell, Beshear, and others in a rare show of bipartisanship. And you will hear the campaign continuing to say that it does help Democrats to run on the Biden record. Of course, what they won't say as readily is that the reason some of these candidates are running separate from the president is because he remains deeply unpopular. And the second is they are feeling really good about the vindication they are getting that abortion remains a really salient issue. This is something they felt very good about last year as a show of political force and a way to drive out their base. And they say that they have gotten that again this year as well. And it will remain a top issue heading into next year.
All right, MJ Lee at the White House. Thanks so much. We're getting a new window into Republican reaction now to the abortion rights measure that passed in Ohio. Manu Raju is on Capitol Hill with that. Manu, what are Republicans saying?
Well, they're actually downplaying this loss. I've talked to several of the top Republicans here in the House about the outcome of the Ohio voters approving that constitutional amendment to affirm abortion rights. Several of them simply say that the 2024 election will turn on other issues. They don't believe abortion will be that salient issue that the White House hopes it will be come next year. That is the view of Jim Jordan, who is, of course, an Ohio Republican, someone who tried to become the Speaker of the House himself. But he said that the issues, in his view, will be determined by things like crime, things like immigration. Abortion, he says, will not be on voters' minds, at least he hopes, come next year. Another House Republican leader told me that he does not believe it will be determinative at all in key House races. And then the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, someone who has made abortion issues, anti-abortion issues, central to his political identity. I asked him about this and about this being the seventh state to affirm abortion rights. He declined to comment, Jake, said that he wanted to look into this a little bit more here. But in talking to Republicans, they don't believe this is a big problem for them, even though last year, the election, 2022, did not go their way, in large part because of abortion. Jake.
All right, Manu Raju on Capitol Hill. Thanks so much. Aaron Burnett.
All right, Jake. So, okay, Alyssa, you just heard what Manu is reporting from Jim Jordan. That no comment on what happened in Ohio on abortion. But it's going to be crime and immigration to look at. Don't look at abortion over there.
Took a similar path to Vivek Ramaswamy, basically saying maybe it's a messaging thing or it's a different issue. Abortion is the issue. But I want to note something. The man who is the most responsible for the Dobbs decision, Donald Trump, actually has been ahead of other Republicans in creating distance on the issue of abortion. What I mean by that is he obviously chose the Supreme Court justices that led to that ruling. But he, about 6 months back, said a federal ban is a huge mistake. He was criticized by Republican outside groups, by fellow candidates. He does seem to uniquely get how damaging the politics of going all in on a full-on ban are. So there's going to be this weird cognitive disconnect. Can he convince the voters? I'm actually fairly moderate on the issue, even though he's who got the country to where it is on the issue.
Yeah, he's got to get out. He's sort of, I shouldn't use the word get out of jail free card in this context, I guess. But he's got to pass. He's got to pass because of those court appointments, and he hasn't been touched in this campaign. Some of them went after him for opposing the 6-week ban and calling it cruel. So he's positioned himself smartly. Can I just say one thing about this, though? The Republican Party unanimously in the House elected a speaker a couple of weeks ago, Mike Johnson, who is one of the most ardent anti-abortion rights members of the United States Congress. for Jim Jordan to say, oh, this isn't going to affect us next year, he's delusional. In every one of those swing districts, those members are going to be held accountable.
I think it's also interesting. You know, there's been a lot of talk about, has Glenn Youngkin charted a new course, a new messaging frame for Republicans here, and we will see obviously what happens in Virginia. But you know, we heard him interviewed earlier, and really fundamentally, his message was a very you know, what you would traditionally call a pro-life message. I mean, he switched the word limit for ban. But, you know, he didn't talk at all about protecting the right of a woman to make her own healthcare decisions or for that to be between her and her doctor. He didn't use, if he's serious about trying to find some sort of new middle ground for Republicans, he didn't use any of the language that is meaningful to people who feel strongly about protecting abortion rights. So,
yeah. It's interesting, though, when we were talking about this briefly off camera, so I'll put it on camera. So, Van, you know, when you look at the New York Times poll, broadly mirroring the one that CNN just put out, but it had the battleground states, and it has Trump ahead of Biden 5 out of 6, right? So when you think about how are you going to motivate things, and I understand it's a year out, it's a snapshot in time, but if you take the abortion issue, is there a way at this point for it to become a part of the voting in any of those states in a way that could actually harness some of this enthusiasm that you're seeing tonight on that issue and put it behind Biden?
I think so, and I think what you're starting to see tonight, look, you brought this poll out, and it was like you just dropped a big brick on everybody's head because all it said is like Democrats suck and Biden's in trouble. And now tonight, actually, it looks like there's reason for hope. There's a heartbeat out there, and the heartbeat is out there when you've got some leadership, you got people reaching out across the aisle, and when you have issues like abortion. I think people are going to be cross-pressured between, you know, despair and hope, between wanting to send the Democrats a message, but not wanting to live in Trump's nightmare world. The game is not over. But I think if you look at the difference between the polling data and the performance at the actual polls, you see this thing is still in motion.
Part of it is the context, right? People didn't think that democracy and election rights issue would be the salient issue during the midterms until there was just person after person who was an election denier who was actually running for office. It's the same thing with the abortion issue. It's not that the issue itself drives people. It's that, do you have someone on the ballot who is speaking in a way that you feel threatened, one way or another? And that context will be meaningful depending on the state. It's not just abortion general, right? It's in Ohio, voters have been asked now multiple times, hey, do you want to enshrine an abortion ban in one way or another? And they're repeatedly rejecting it. The more you're talking about it, the more you're putting it in front of the voters, the more you're creating a salience issue that even if there might not have been one before.
Look, Republicans are going to have to figure out a new path forward if they're going to win, and if we're going to want to win. Abortion's been on the ballot in Kansas, you know, in Kansas,
Kentucky,
right?
In
Kentucky,
Kansas, yes.
In Kansas, Kentucky, Ohio now, over and over. At some point, the Republican Party's got to wake up and say, what are we doing wrong here, right? We have to fix this. We have to fix how we talk about it. We have to fix how we think about it. We're going to keep losing, right? They're going to have to be.
So the question is, can you do that within the context of a party that demands it?
Well, and therein lies the rub, right? Because everyone has to get through a primary, right? Kate was talking about earlier, you know, we want to see these people want to see in America these really nice political figures who kind of chart a middle path. And of course, that's what everyone wants to see. But we're not going to get there because the party system is set up to reward extremes on both sides. Those candidates never make it out of a primary. You know, most people, all Congress.
I wouldn't say it's the party system. One would argue it is also gerrymandering.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So when you have 435 members of Congress and there are 400 Congress people who sit at home and don't worry about an opponent, they're more worried about losing in a primary than they are in a general election, right? It makes things it's very tough to kind of be in the middle, moderate, right, in America.
To Kate's point about it can't just be the messaging, it has to be the policy. Well, 15 weeks is supported by 68% of Americans. Now, that doesn't mean that many don't want more access to abortion beyond that, but that is a fairly moderate place where the broadest swath of America is. But you have to then actually sell that, and you have to talk about what an overarching vision is. And this is where the GOP continues to lose it. It's paid parental leave. It's greater access to foster care. It is contraceptives. You have to have a comprehensive plan and say, we are going to be the most pro-woman party if we're going to say there's going to be restrictions on one side of abortion.
Right, and also, do people vote, you know, when you talk about 68% of people support that, okay, but do they think in those terms? Right, we were talking about it actually, and we didn't get to talk to Tim Scott about it, but he had supported a 20-week ban, then a 15-week ban, right? And it's 62% in the exit poll of Ohio. Of people said they supported legal in most or all cases. So how do people get to a level on a voting booth of what does most or all mean to me? or is it a feeling?
Well, exactly. And I think that you have to put it into the stark terms of about, that gets you about 4 months in, or roughly 4 months in, 15 weeks. And I think for a lot of people that potentially seems like a reasonable place to be, but it's very different when somebody's in the situation of a crisis pregnancy, which again goes back to why you have to have all the resources on the front end to try to keep as few women from being in that position.
But all this conversation tonight and what we saw in Ohio, Kate, does this put more air into the balloon of the abortion discussion? Because I feel like a couple weeks ago, a lot of people were saying, okay, that had its moment.
Yeah.
Had its moment. People were passionate about it. Now they've lost that passion. Has that changed now?
Well, I'm not sure it had ever changed because voters were clearly still feeling passionate, right? I mean, you're absolutely right that the political conversation had kind of moved on, but that wasn't, turns out, actually where voters are. So I think, to Alyssa's point, I think people don't necessarily sit and think about, 6 weeks versus 15 versus 20, 26. Some do. Most don't. I think most feel this larger sense that their rights are being taken away. Choice is being taken away. Their freedom is being taken away. And so, in a state like Virginia, where I would agree that most voters there would probably tell you that 15 weeks, with some exceptions for the health of the mother, is a reasonable place to be. It doesn't feel like that when what Youngkin and the Republicans are saying is we're pulling back from what's currently allowed, which is 26.
Right. That's
And again, it's not the math; it's the meaning, it's the intention. I mean, and so I think the Republican Party has given a signal that they are willing to crush people's rights in the name of some kind of ideology, and Democrats are saying we respect you more than that. It's not going to be the math, it's going to be the intention.
It's just interesting when you've got Republicans at the point where most people agree, but the feeling that's coming from it is different, I guess.
I think there's a patina of extremism that has infected the Republican Party. That isn't a both parties thing. I think it really is a problem for the Republican Party. You can dominate primaries that way, very hard to win general elections that way.
All right, all stay with us, and there is so much more ahead as Republicans fight to keep their grip on the governor's office in Mississippi. We are watching that one right now. And what do tonight's results mean for President Biden after these crucial wins already notched for Democrats in both Kentucky and Ohio?
Ahead of Democrat Brandon Presley, who has 42.2% of the vote. Let's go to Virginia now, where there's a ferocious battle for control of the legislature. In the House of Delegates, Democrats are leading in 53 of the races, and 47 races Republicans are leading. In the state Senate, Democrats are leading in 21 of the races, Republicans in 19. And the Democrats already control the state Senate. Right now, the Republicans control the House of Delegates. If these races continue as they are right now, that would be a pickup of one of the houses, one of the legislatures in Richmond. We'll see how that shakes out. John King, what do you got for me here?
So let's focus on Mississippi, then get back to the broader dynamic. You keep asking the question, is it possible? As you noted, Governor Reeves, the Republican incumbent, Tate Reeves, his lead has increased since the last time we had this conversation. And that has happened even as more votes have come in this Democratic belt in the western part of the state. I just want to show you, just bring in who lives here. If you come in and look at who lives in this part of the state, this is a largely, you see, the deeper the color here, the higher the percentage of black voters in this area. It is a traditionally Democratic area in the western part of the state, and that is where the Democrat, Brandon Presley, is getting votes, but as more of that has filled in, so here's the one place we're still waiting. We have nothing from the largest county in the state, Jackson, the suburbs around it. This gets more rural as you move out here. So here's the mathematical challenge, right? No votes. It's a predominantly Democratic area, so you say, wait, let's just wait and be cautious. It would be, it's just not right to call the race until you get votes from this area. However, the Democratic candidate 4 years ago beat Tate Reeves by 40,000 votes in Hinds County. So let's just hypothetically say that happened here. That would still not be enough, right? And so you're still looking, there's more votes coming in, but there's still some votes out in the Republican area. So this looks like the governor is on a path, but we need to wait and see what happens in here. So that's the one thing outstanding, plus those Virginia races. But now let's just go back to that dynamic. So what's happening tonight, right? We at the beginning of the night, we said, what does tonight tell us? Will tonight tell us important things that we can carry over into 2024?
I think it is.
Right. So that's the challenge, right? So a Democratic incumbent, a guy who says we should work with the other party, talks a lot about roads and infrastructure. Sounds like Joe Biden, right? Presents himself as a moderate. Okay, let's have the ish. Okay, ish. Yeah. Wins convincingly. right? Wins convincingly. That's a big deal. In a very red state, that's a big deal. That's a yes for Democrats, right? So then you come up to Ohio, a red state. Abortion right forces not only winning, but winning by 11 points right now, right? In a state, Donald Trump won by 8. Wow, that's a big deal, right? And so now you have what's happening in Virginia, where if the Democrats hold the state Senate, that's another victory for the abortion position. That's another victory.
And pick up the House of Delegates.
If they do that,
right,
that's a huge rebuke of Governor Youngkin.
Well, you also didn't mention the fact that one of the reasons I think Beshear won, one of the reasons of many, is that he painted the Attorney General as an anti-abortion extremist.
Right. Exactly.
And so, I mean, like, the abortion theme, I think, is a big part.
Yes, abortion. So Democrats, yes, it's without a doubt, helping Democrats in a red state. The constitutional amendment passing, again, pro-abortion rights amendment passing in a red state. And so then you come to Virginia. I'm just going to bring up the 2020 map here. We don't have live feed from the from the legislative race.
Yeah.
But in a state, Joe Biden won by 10 points, and Governor Youngkin won just barely. But by 3 points, 2 years later, Governor Youngkin was trying to say, I can win in the suburbs, I can elect these legislators, and we will ban abortion after 15 weeks. If he does not get the assembly, that would be another. We'll see what happens with the results. That would be another. So we're having this conversation about momentum for the Democrats. We're still waiting on Virginia, but momentum for the Democrats and the abortion issue, the way they characterize it in Kentucky. Momentum in Ohio. And yet, what were we talking about earlier tonight? Our brand new CNN poll, let me just come back to the presidential race, that shows Joe Biden in a ton of trouble.
Yep.
A ton of trouble. Our national poll, combine that with the New York Times Siena College poll, where he was losing here, losing here, losing here, losing here, losing here, and losing here. And so
that's not good.
That's not good. Thank you very much. That's excellent. And so what this looks like is this.
Yep.
Right? Donald Trump, 5 of those 6 states, Donald Trump won in 2016 and was president. In 2020, Joe Biden takes them back and he's president. So which is it? Are Democratic issues having a great night in Kentucky, red state, Ohio, red state, Virginia, bluish purple state, so Democrats should be celebrating? Or should we be looking at the Biden poll and Democrats should be saying, oh no, right? And so this is, David Chalian, you're looking at this poll. Is this, yes, tonight looks like a good night for the Democrats. Is there a carryover?
Tonight is undoubtedly a good night for the Democrats. There's no doubt about it. And it's not just issues. You noted Beshear's identity is part of this, his political identity. I think what we are seeing tonight is that, and by the way, tonight, guys, builds on a year of successes in special elections for Democrats. Builds on last year's midterm elections where they overperformed expectations, largely on the issues of abortion rights and democracy. So Democrats have been on a run here. And I think when you look at the poll, you see that there is a Biden problem more than there is a Democratic Party problem. So we asked in our poll, in dealing with the nation's issues, Biden is mostly part of the problem or the solution. Overall, 61% said he's part of the problem. Look at this breakdown here. Obviously, 95% of Republicans say he's part of the problem. 2/3 of independents, 67%, say in dealing with the nation's issues, Biden is mostly part of the problem, and 1/4 of Democrats. Now, one other data point for you from our poll. Look at the generic congressional ballot. This is the which party do you want to control Congress for next year? It's tied 48% to 47%. So the generic Democrat running for Congress here is overperforming what Joe Biden's doing. And Joe Biden's problem, as we talked about with black voters, Latino voters, young voters, it's in his own house. He has work to do, which, by the way, is why the Biden folks feel somewhat like they do have a path out of this doldrum moment that they're in, because they have to revitalize and enthuse their own folks who have already been with them. It's not a guarantee that he can do that, but that's a lot easier than trying to go in and dig in and convert people. And so it is within his own house that we see this diminishment of support. 1/4 of Democrats say he's part of the problem. That's not, I mean, Andy Beshear didn't win that big without winning a slew of Trump voters also. What we're seeing tonight is the Democratic brand is not in trouble here. Joe Biden is in trouble.
So can Joe Biden, in the year between now and then, his personal structural issues, vitality, is he up to the job? That's a big problem. The issues portfolio, as David notes, the Democrats seem to be able to use to their advantage. That's it. Can he reinforce his personal characteristics, some which are weak at the moment, and get the issues portfolio that helps even in a place like this. Got a whole year. We'll see.
Yeah, and this will be the first post-Roe presidential election we've ever had, which is another wild card thrown into the entire mix. A key race for Republicans is still undecided right now, with more than half of the vote reported in the Mississippi's governor race. Up next, we're going to talk to Republican presidential candidate Chris Christie about tonight's results and what that all says about the political climate in 2024. Stay with us.
The Democrat, Brandon Presley at 42.2%. Hinds County, where Jackson is still outstanding, and obviously that's significant, often quite predictive, so nowhere near making a call as we await for Hinds County there, but closely watching the Mississippi governor's race right now. Abby.
Thanks, Aaron. While we wait on that, let's just get more tonight on some of the key races and the 2024 race with Republican presidential candidate Chris Christie, who's also the former governor of the state of New Jersey. Governor Christie, in Ohio tonight, the big story is that voters have yet again voted to codify abortion rights there. Is the Republican Party on the wrong side of this issue when it comes to the average American voter?
Well, Abby, look, I think that, for 50 years, conservatives have been arguing that this was not a federal issue, that it should be decided state by state. I've certainly felt that way. And I think you got to let it be decided state by state, and that's exactly what's happening. And so the voters are getting their opportunity to speak. The Supreme Court took that away from voters for 50 years with Roe versus Wade. I support voters making these choices and states making these choices. And whatever the results are what the people want them to be. And that was my whole argument with Roe from the beginning in terms of what they did legally. They took this out of the hands of the people and put it in the hands of 9 justices on the Supreme Court. That was wrong. And now let each state make their own decisions. You're going to have great variation across the country in terms of what people want.
So back in 2015, you supported a 20-week federal abortion ban. I think you know as well as I do, a lot of folks on the right, some of these anti-abortion groups, they really do want this to come to the federal level. Likely, if there's a Republican president, if you were the Republican president, they would want to bring it to your desk. If they did that, given what we've seen tonight, would you vote or would you sign a bill that banned abortion at the federal level at any amount of weeks?
I think I just answered that, Abby. What I said was that, the people of the states should have the right to make this call. They have the right
just
to
to be
make this
clear,
call
so that's a no. You would not support.
Well, why don't you
would not sign
Abby,
anything at the federal
Abby,
level that bans abortion.
Abby, if you let me finish my answer, I'd be happy to give you a complete answer. What I'm saying to you is that I want this entire 50-state experiment to go forward. And let's see what all 50 states have to say about this. If at some point there was a clear consensus amongst all 50 states about some number of weeks, that would be something I'd be willing to consider. But it would have to be a consensus that was formed by the 50 states.
So I just want to be clear. If anti-abortion groups came to you and said, we want to know what your position is on any federal ban, you would say, no support for a federal ban unless all 50 states voted in favor of a federal ban. Is that correct?
No, that's incorrect. You mischaracterized my position. What I said was there's going to be all kinds of different positions. In my home state of New Jersey, you can have an abortion up to the 9th month. In the state of Oklahoma, there's no abortion unless the woman's health or her life is at risk. And there's going to be all kinds of different variations in between. If bringing all those together, there was a consensus at some midpoint that could get 60 votes in the United States Senate and come to a president's desk, I'd consider that. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. And quite frankly, I want all the states to be able to make their own judgments on this before the federal government even considers weighing in.
So also tonight, in a very red state, the state of Kentucky, the Democratic incumbent, he beat a rising star in your party, Daniel Cameron. Cameron was also notably endorsed by Trump. He was embraced by him and embraced Trump himself. Was that a mistake on his part?
Daniel Cameron was a rising star in the Republican Party until he decided to throw his lot in with Donald Trump. I mean, let's face it, Donald Trump is political and electoral poison down ballot. Down ballot, his endorsement has led to Republican defeats in the House, in the Senate rather, and the House in 18. In 20, we lost the United States Senate and the White House. In 22, we underperformed miserably. And tonight, you're seeing us lose again. Daniel Cameron made a huge mistake by embracing Donald Trump and selling his soul to him. That's what he did. And the voters of Kentucky, very red state, as you noted, gave their verdict on politicians who sell their soul to Donald Trump.
It's looking to be, Governor Christie, a potentially good night for Democrats in Kentucky and Ohio on that ballot measure, even in the state, the Commonwealth of Virginia. Is there a risk here that Republicans are too overconfident that Biden can be beat when it seems like voters seem open, at least, to the Democratic Party and even some of the policies that have been on the table in this off-year election?
Any Republican who's overconfident about beating Joe Biden next year is a foolish Republican. The president's incumbency will be a very strong tool on his behalf. And so if he is the candidate for the Democratic Party, which it appears he will be always be a difficult opponent. He defeated an incumbent president himself just 3 years ago. So I don't think anybody should be overconfident. But what we should be concerned about is if we're going to absolutely put a loser up against him. Donald Trump lost to him in 2020. Donald Trump has led us to losers up and down the ticket for the House, for the Senate, and in governorships. This has been a disastrous run for the Republican Party, with Trump picking these candidates and embracing them, and independent voters all across this country rejecting him. That's why, Abby, I've been out there making the case against Donald Trump in a way that none of these other candidates have. The other 4 candidates are going to be on the stage with me tomorrow night, all raised their hand and said they would support Donald Trump even if he was a convicted felon. I mean, this is the path to defeat. We have to defeat Donald Trump in the primary to have any chance of beating Joe Biden in the general election. That's why I want to continue to make this argument on the debate stage. Folks should go to chrischristie.com and donate to keep me up on that stage, because I'm the only one who's willing to take it directly to Donald Trump.
All right, Governor Christie, thank you.
Abby, thanks for having me. Always good talking to you.
And back to you, Aaron.
All right, Abby, well, stay with us because we're getting more votes from the governor's race in Mississippi. The Republican incumbent right now holding his lead, but most crucial county still outstanding. Plus, that high-stakes battle for control of the Virginia legislature is still unfolding. We're going to get updates and show you how much it may matter for the 2024 election after this break.
Of the vote. That's ahead of Democratic challenger Brandon Presley, who has 43% of the vote. That's with 62% of the estimated vote in. That's a sizable amount of the vote in. John King, there's still quite some vote to come in. We got about 37% of the vote still remaining to come in, but 62% is a lot. And the margin here, 12 points or so, is quite sizable.
It is. And so you're getting close. You're getting close to the range unless the numbers change dramatically, and change dramatically very quickly. And this is what we were waiting for the last couple of times you've been here, Hinds County. So we just started. That's our first.
Just to remind people, I'm sorry to interrupt, the biggest county. And
the biggest county in the state by far, 8% of the statewide population, and also a very Democratic county. Right, so if you're in Philadelphia, if you're in Pennsylvania, this is Philadelphia. If you're in Ohio, this is Cleveland. Right, if you're in California, this is Los Angeles. This is where you know you're going to get a lot of Democratic votes. However, the question is it enough? 86%, 13% of the vote, and so that you look at that and you think, aha, well, we're behind, but that's big math. Can he hold 86% as we get up to 100? That's really the challenge here, because if you look at this, you come back, I just want to bring it out again. So here's the race right now. Let's go back 4 years ago and look. Tate Reeves won, 52-46, so a 6-point race, 47 if you round that up, a 5-point race if you bring that up. So what happened here? It was 78-22, right? You see the vote margin there. So 40,000 votes, right? 40,000 votes, the Democrat won Hinds County by then. And you come back here now, we don't know how much he's going to win Hinds County. The Democrat's going to win Hinds County. We don't know by how much, but look, if it's a 40,000 vote margin, it's not enough. because we're filling in everywhere else. You see these other gray areas. There will be, a few more thousand more votes coming in. 62%, a fair amount of votes still coming in. But the percentages out here, as you get into these places where you see 80% of the vote in, you move over here. See, tiny, small county, still only 4% of the vote in a blue place, but 81% here. So there's just not much more math to be done. The big math to be done is all right here. And so I'm just going to see as we wait here, we're at the 13% a minute ago, we're still there. So now you wait and you see mathematically possible, maybe, mathematically probable. Your eyes don't lie.
So I know you don't like it when I touch your map, but
could be my guest.
You sure?
Sure.
So I'm just going to go to Hinds County. See, I don't know if I don't have the touch.
There you
Okay,
go,
Hinds County. So it's about a 7,000 vote margin, right, with 13%. So extrapolating that out, if Brandon Presley kept up this margin and won by 65,000 votes in just this one county,
right?
Possible, not probable, but possible. 65,000. I know it's not enough in that one county, but that gets him in spitting distance.
That's why we haven't called it, because you just
Okay.
you just wait. You be conservative and let's just count them. There are some people are in a hurry, right?
I'm not saying I'd put my house on it. I'm not saying I would bet any money on it, but I'm just saying it's possible.
Yeah, it's possible. We're in the back half of the book, but we're not in the final chapter until we know where that gets us.
Yeah.
Does it get it close enough to then grind it out from 80% to 95% in the places where all the votes aren't in yet? Again, I would say improbable, but not impossible, which is why we count votes, which is why every now and then we are surprised.
Yeah. Now, are there enough telltale signs, though, that would cause people to be calling the race right now?
Oh, there are just some people. You can, again, you just did the math. You did exactly the way people on decision desks are doing it, right? So this was a 40,000 vote margin 4 years ago. If he keeps this percentage and if turnout is equal, then he has the potential to be higher than a 40,000 vote margin. Jim Hood had 70-something, he's at 86. So it's conceivable that instead of a 40,000 vote margin, it's a 50 or 55 or maybe even a 60,000 vote margin. So then you're saying, okay, well, what would that get you? And then what do I still have out here on the board, right? So you have no votes at all here, but it's 0.6% of the population, right? Now, it's 65% Democratic county. Presley's going to win here. He's going to win here. And he's going to win probably by a sizable margin. This is a Democrat plus 41 in a presidential year. Joe Biden won this county. Again, it's only 1% of the state population, but he won it by 40 points.
So show me how Joe Biden won this county. What did he get?
There you go. 70%.
Okay, so 4,000 votes.
4,000 votes.
Okay, and show me the other one that...
Where were we? We were down here. And let's just make sure we're in the same place. Where are we this year? No, we got nothing here. Yeah.
Okay, so what was it for Joe Biden? It was.
So now we come back to that again, and we come here.
And it's a 5,000.
5,000 votes.
Okay.
So it's.
I mean.
So if you get, let's come back to the right race.
But we're not going to have that kind of turnout, though.
You're not going to have presidential turnout. But,
right.
But you're talking. If let's say it's 2,000 instead of 4,000, right? So this is why it matters. Does this get you closer?
It's very, very improbable.
Correct.
I would not put any money on it.
Correct, but
who knows?
But we count.
Right. What you really need to know is you need more votes to come in from Hinds County.
You need to see when you get to 50, 60, 70%.
That's what it is.
Is that number still above 80? And not just the percentage. What's the turnout compared to the last election? Are are the raw numbers? You need. Yes, the percentages help. But if there's only 10,000 votes, the percentage doesn't help you. If there's 100,000 votes, then you're doing business.
We're going to squeeze in a quick break. We'll be right back.
Pass a resolution to censure the Democratic Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan over comments critical of Israel that she had made in support of Palestinians amid Israel's war against Hamas. She had defended the use of the phrase "from the river to the sea," which of course is generally viewed as a call for the extermination, the elimination of Israel. She had defended the use of that phrase, and now the censure, which is a major and rare rebuke. The vote was 234 to 188. 4 Republicans voted against, 22 Democrats voted in support of the censure resolution. My panel with me here now, the context here, David Axelrod, obviously, I mean, this is a significant development coming on Capitol Hill. this particular issue right now, the war, Israel's war against Hamas, is right now front and center in the political discourse and in polls in crucial, battleground states.
Yes. Well, Michigan in particular,
Yep.
where Biden got strong support from the Arab American community around Detroit, which is pretty significant, and there's been a precipitous drop in support there, and obviously among young people, where there's a tremendous amount of division about the strong support the president's given Israel, given the attacks of Israel on Gaza and Hamas, From the River to the Sea does have meaning, and she did distort what the meaning of that was. It does mean the elimination of Israel, and that's certainly what Hamas means by it.
Absolutely.
So, that is to a lot of folks, me included, an offensive notion.
Kate, interesting in the context here of Biden, who has tried to walk a line here, speaking for a possible ceasefire for humanitarian reasons, a brief one, but still obviously very much in support of Israel's right to defend itself. What do you make of a vote count here on this, in this context? 234 to 188, incredibly split. 22 Republicans, though, joining the more Democratic side, and Democrats, and 4 Republicans against.
Yeah, well, I mean, it speaks to how divided the country is about this and how emotional people are, understandably. I mean, this is a horrific thing. We are seeing just awful, horrible, just incredibly awful images every single day, really heartrending. So, of course, it's understandable that people are upset and that they're emotional. I think, the politics of this, I think what President Biden has tried to do, is to express support for Israel. Let's not forget, I'm not sure there's another country in the world that could be attacked via a terror attack in the way that Israel was on October 7th, where the United States would say you don't have a right to retaliate. So the president, I think, has been incredibly supportive. Remember, he also went to Israel in the days after the attack, in part to put his arm around Netanyahu to help guide. So I think that gets lost sometimes in the intense rhetoric, which is understandable. But let's not forget.
By the way, ran an ad that essentially accused the president of being a party to a genocide. I mean,
Are you surprised, David, by the split, though, that we've seen in this country? Sort of, as I think it has taken some by surprise to see the backlash on the Democratic left on this issue. This didn't used to be an issue where there was a lot of space between the two parties.
No, listen, I mean, this has been going on for years. The BDS movement on college campuses has been festering for years and years and years, and it's been quietly festering, and now it's raised its ugly head, and it's for everyone to see. And I think, look, it should be widely condemned. I mean, this is a great step here on the floor. Shouldn't be acceptable in any form.
There's a massive generational shift on this issue that I think Democrats have to wrap their arms around. When you have someone like Hillary Clinton definitively saying people who are calling for a ceasefire do not understand Hamas, and then having students walk out, a consummate Democrat who's worked in foreign policy her entire career. Young people, there is polling that shows they don't understand the Holocaust. They don't understand the history of the region, why the Israeli statehood came about. You can support the Palestinian people. You can support a two-state solution, but you have to be able to condemn terrorism, which is where I think Rashida Tlaib screwed up.
All right, all of you, thank you very much. As our continuing coverage of the breaking election developments continues, we've got more key races to call in these hours ahead, and our coverage continues with Laura Coates and Abby Phillip after a brief break.